Welcome to the regular meeting of City Council, January 13, 2020. This meeting will now come to order. Please stand for the invocation by Councilmember Costin.
Please just join me for a moment of silence. Thank you.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance by Hunter Fike from Diplomat Elementary.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Just in time. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I call roll, I would like to announce that Councilmember Nelson has asked to be excused, and I will mark her so. Mayor Coviello?
Here.
Councilmembers Carriosha?
Here.
Costin?
Here.
Gunter?
Here.
Stout?
Here.
Welsh?
Here.
Williams?
Here.
7 present, 1 excused.
Thank you. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda? Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second. Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Okay, we have no recognitions this evening, no minutes to approve. Let's go on to item 8, business. 8A is public comment on the consent agenda. Maximum of 60 minutes is set for input. Citizens on matters concerning the consent agenda, 3 minutes per individual. Please remember to state your name for the record. Anyone wishing to speak on the consent agenda, please step forward to the podium. Seeing none, public comment on the consent agenda is now closed. I'll now open up the consent agenda for council to pull any items. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion. Second.
Any other discussion? Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Item 8C is citizens' input time. A maximum of 60 minutes is set for input on citizens on matters concerning city government, 3 minutes per individual. Please remember to state your name for the record. Anyone wishing to speak on citizens' input, please come to the podium.
I'm Linda Grashorn, Grashorn, and I'm here to talk about the modifications to the Tropicana Park. Okay? Every day for the past 6 months, I passed this sign on the way in and out of our development.
I'm going to give Linda some help with the overhead. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep.
So it's been there maybe 6 months. We see it. We're used to it being there. And for all intents and purpose, it's a good, that the concept is a good concept. It's the architectural rendering of the Tropicana Park. I viewed the plan as a good opportunity for Cape Coral residents to enjoy the assets that this incredible landscape offers. I have firsthand positive experience with the Tropicana Park concept. It's the Cape Christian Church Fellowship Park. It's out on Chiquita Boulevard in Cape Coral. And the park entertains dozens of children and their families. The park has, it's open daily to the kids, it's free. It has the splash pad, it has the multiple grills, it has the picnic tables, the pavilions, and the playgrounds. and it has the restrooms and seating and water fountains. They love it there, and it's always dozens of them out there. Then I discovered on December the 2nd, I've just heard this recently, that the City Council approved a new concept plan based on request by 2 private clubs, and no input was solicited from the public. Residents were never notified by mail or any other form of communication. That's a fraud, and you know better. You can't do that. The modified plan takes 2 enormous 17,000 square foot pieces of prime park land to build 2 15,000 square foot storage facilities that are described as fenced storage, trailers, and other storage for canoe and kayaks. The proposed amendments are the result of what I think are backroom deal makers in order to accommodate the Calusa Coast Rowing Club and the South Florida Canoe and Kayak Club. None of the city's public hearings have included the revisions. The sign out at the park today is just as it was 6 months ago. And there are, as I understand it, legal problems regarding the zoning, the safety, its access, and how it's going to be funded, including the use of our GO-BOND tax funds. And by the way, is that me?
You got to wrap it up. Thank you.
May I just say that this house is mine. I'm overlooking the park, and we have no intention of looking at what is to become an eyesore.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Shallow, and I live in Northwest Cape Coral near Tropicana Park. I am a kayak fisherman and have used the existing launch for the last 10 years. I am against the lease agreement the city has proposed with the Rowing and Kayak Club at Tropicana Park. It could curb or eliminate my use of the park as a kayak launch. The timing of the proposal, after we spent time drawing up the original plan, does not give the public input into the new plan. I don't think the public-private partnership will work at this site. I urge the mayor and council to step back and reevaluate other options for a location for the Rowing and Kayak Club. Tropicana Park should have a public kayak ramp that is accessible to the public to launch a kayak. By stepping back, all parties involved can come to a consensus that's agreeable to everyone involved. I urge the mayor and council to look at other options that are available so we can move forward with all parties on board. For a growing city like ours, issues similar to this are bound to arise. Working together will develop a template to use to solve these problems and bring us together rather than drive us apart. You're our elected representatives, and we look to your leadership to find a solution that works for all parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis Smith, I live in Cape Coral, 16 years, District 6. I'd like to give some input on the noise ordinance. Last week, I attended the meeting out of curiosity of the news. I've been involved with loud bar rooms for a few years myself, living north of Pine Island Road. I'm just basically here to remind everybody, there's a lot of people moving into Cape Coral. I'm a school teacher, behavioral specialist at Skyline Elementary. I can tell you that we're at capacity, and we're still getting a lot of new kids. So I think the families that are moving here should be addressed as well as just the people that want to go downtown. And to ask bar owners and DJs that spoke last week to bring their stuff in at 11 o'clock, I don't think is outrageous. The fact that they didn't do that without the ordinance may speak to the reason that we need the ordinance. The police department is doing a great job, in my personal opinion, and I just ask you to leave an ordinance in their hands that they can do their job to protect and serve us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Barbara Boroff. I'm a resident of West Cape Estates, which borders the north side of Tropicana Park. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you this evening about an enormously important issue, the major revision to the original proposal for Tropicana Park and the desire of the council to approve a lease for land within the park to 2 private organizations. 54% of the citizens of Cape Coral voted to fund 7 new neighborhood parks, development of 3 community parks, and 2 freshwater boat ramps, in addition to new playground equipment, shade structures, pavilion fencing, and improvements to parking areas. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Well, it isn't so wonderful. We now have a nightmare before us. Why? This is why. Some of you council members are pandering to the desire of the private clubs by changing the original vision of the park and wanting to allow the private clubs to lease 2 17,000 square feet pieces of land, which would include 2 monstrous storage buildings. A significant reduction of the beach area, elimination of splash pads, and possible elimination of amenities, such as grills and benches. Do you think the citizens would have voted for this had they known this would happen? Approximately 1,000 citizens, it's slightly under 1,000 at this time, have signed a petition against the proposal to lease the land to the club. But wait, the nightmare doesn't stop here. Can you imagine what it's going to look like with 2 huge metal storage buildings measuring 15,000 square feet each, adjacent to Old Burnt Store Road? It's going to look like a warehouse area. Big metal buildings, think about that. Is that part of the Cape Coral beautification? Another concern is the spreader. In a good boating day, I estimate approximately 100 boats travel up and down the spreader, going right past Tropicana Park. There's only one way out of the spreader, and every boat that goes out has to come back in. The huge kayaks, which I understand are about 62 feet long, plus a pontoon boat that I understand accompanies the kayakers, will significantly impact the boaters to freely maneuver up and down the spreader. As a side note, the kayakers may be putting themselves at risk because of speeding boats that are frequently observed. Lastly, consider the traffic that will be created at the intersection of Tropicana and Old Burnt Store Road. Old Burnt Store Road will be made into a 4-lane road. There will be traffic coming off of Tropicana, traffic going up and down Old Burnt Store Road, and traffic created by the clubs, and even more traffic if the club sponsor meets.
Thank you.
Conclusion, stop the nonsense. Do not vote to lease public land to a private group. It's a citizen park, the citizens' park, and not a park for a private club.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Driscoll, and I'm a resident of West Cape Estates Circle. And I, too, am speaking on the situation on Tropical Park. I am for Tropical Park, but I am not for the 2 buildings that they're proposing to build. I think it's definitely it's a special interest situation, and these folks need to go and find their own place, and you know, it's not for the public interest. This park should be allocated for all the people, not just 2 special groups. And everybody else has covered it, but that's what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Shepard. What I wanted to speak on was there was a new pervious laws that were passed a few months back that affected the home builders and pool builders, that they have to cover less of the property so that we have more percolation for when it rains, to re-energize our aquifer, and that's all understandable. But what seems odd to me, it seems in our local government that one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. So we told the home builders and we told the pool builders, and without any warning at all, that these changes are made. Make your house's footprint smaller, make your pool's footprint smaller, but yet in the parks plan, we're paving parking lots. That's not pervious. So it doesn't make any sense. The government's telling us that we can't cover the ground, and we have to make alterations to cover less, but yet our parks plan isn't even doing that. Now, I can tell you that in the business I'm in, there are many parks around Cape Coral and our neighboring communities that use shell or pervious or grass, and they just pave the entrance of the parking lot or the roads in the parking lot. And where the cars are parked, they leave it grass or shell or something pervious to allow more penetration from the rain. But we're not doing that at our parks. Why? What it also does is when you pave the area, the retention area has to be larger, the catch basin. So that makes our parks, we have to destroy more wildlife, we have to cut more trees down because we have to create this giant retention pond, where if we just kept it a pervious parking lot, the retention pond wouldn't have to be as big. But obviously, this information's all too late because everything's been designed. But what I'm upset about is our local government. You enforced it on the builders, but you didn't enforce it on yourselves. We're designing parks and we're not worrying about being pervious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, my name is Mona Farquharson, and I just want to address the Tropicana Park. I'm watching the faces of everyone up here, and a lot of you look like you're bored and not really listening to what people are saying. My question to you, Mr. Mayor, is was there a water traffic survey done for safety, sight lines, and liability related to the waterways at Tropicana Park? I assume you all live in Cape Coral, and that must mean some of you are boaters. Tropicana Park is surrounded by an S curve, and when you are boating, there are 2 blind turns. If you're coming from the north, there are 2 blind turns. I'm a little nervous about doing this. If you're coming from the south, there are 2 blind turns. The width is approximately 200 feet of the canal there, so coming around the corner, a boater has to be, coming from the north, the boater has to be in the middle of the canal, the spreader, in order to make the turn and be in deep enough water. The boater also has to deal with currents, wind. Yesterday there was white caps on the spreader right at Tropicana Park, which means that maneuvering the boat can be a little tricky. So I have nothing wrong to say about South Florida Canoe, Kayak, and Rowing Club. As a matter of fact, I have checked their website, and a lot of the work they do is wonderful. They have birthday parties for kids, beginners taking kayaks out. They have summer camps for kids taking kayaks out. They also have beginners sessions. They also have their training camps, and they expect about 300 people to train there every year. My problem is when you have an S curve, has the city done a water traffic safety report? Because the sight lines are almost impossible. We boat that way all the time, and when we get to Matlacha and the kayak clubs at Matlacha, we have about 3,000 feet of a sight line. We can see the kayakers. They send them out maybe 12 at a time. I've seen pictures on the South Florida Canoe and Kayak Club websites of 20 or 30 kids, some of them 9 years old, all in a group. And when you see them in the pictures, they're spread out about 200 feet. The width of the canal is only 200 feet. A boater, to be safe, has to be 100 feet into the canal. If you're passing another boat, take away another 20 feet. You've got 60 feet approximately for all these kayakers to be. At least be concerned about the liability of having boaters, children, kayakers, all in the same S-curve with no visibility.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Chris Camarata, a resident of Cape Coral for 28 years, and I'm here to address the council and the mayor. I was here last week asking you guys to show up for a meeting, a very important meeting, regarding a 4 Mile Preserve. I was hoping 1 or 2 of you guys showed up, but you showed up in force, and I'm here to personally thank you for coming. I even put a tie on, okay, to see you guys, okay, because that's how important I think it is for you guys that you showed up. The mayor, thank you, Mr. Coviello, for writing that letter for us, and we had 5 councilmen. We were truly representative by the city council in this very important matter. We had Ms. Welsh, Ms. Nelson, Marilyn Stout, my representative, Jessica Cosden, and John Gunther. Okay, with all that's been in light, what's going on with the city, this is a positive note, and we need all the positive things that's been going on. So thank you very much for showing. You guys did the right thing. You hit it out of the park. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. John Kircher. I live in the Northwest. Let's change the subject. I read the papers. I pull public records reports. I can't fathom why so many people are treated so differently. A clerk that made a mistake, terminated. A department head made errors, put out on leave. Public Works, business manager, twice created problems within the city and was found guilty of violating city regulations. He gets another year contract. How do you guys do that? Who's responsible? That's not right.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, staff. I'm Sandra Weston. I live in the Southwest Cape, District 3. And as many of you are already aware, I am on the board of directors for the Caloose Coast Rowing Club. I'm also the head youth rowing coach. I'm not here to air grievances. I'm not here to mount a defense of the 501c3 community athletic organization I represent. I'm here to simply ask that we keep our eyes on the long-term vision for the city, for the community at large, that we keep our eyes on the mission of city government and Parks and Recreation, which is to enhance the overall well-being for all of our citizens, to enhance the quality of life for them. And I just ask that with all of the background noise that's going on, most of which is not grounded or based in fact, that we would keep our eyes on what's truly best for the community at large. We've been serving the community. We exist solely for the purpose of community service for over 12 years. And we're in a fairly obscure location, but just this past Saturday, in the space of about 90 to 100 minutes, we hosted our second ever Experience Rowing for Free event. That event drew 55 people who've never held an oar in their hands. They were absolutely delighted to get in boats for the very first time. We took them down what we call our home canal, which is right there adjacent to the Chiquita Lock on a Saturday morning. Scads of motorboats trying to get out into the Caloosahatchee queued up. We took people who've never held an oar safely down that canal in 18-mile-per-hour winds. At the point of telling you all of that is, let's keep our eyes focused on a partnership on filling a void in a portfolio for a city that has over 400 miles of water intentionally surrounding it. Let's stay focused on that and resist the temptation to fall prey to just trying to quell the noise of a small group of people. This is of great benefit. The opportunities for youth are incredible. Scholarship opportunities and the community at large greatly benefit. I thank you so very much for your consideration. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Richard Osman, and I live on the Southwest Cape. And I'm here to let you know there's a very important event going on this Saturday. It's related to the 2 newspaper articles that were in the Breeze on Friday. And if you read the paper, you'll notice both of them were to do with a shortage of blood in this area caused by our wonderful friends coming down from the north and coming in from California and everywhere they're coming from. And we just, the lease system realizes there is going to be a shortage. So they actually scheduled 2 mobile buses to be downtown Cape. One of them will be at the American Legion Hall, 90, on 1401 Southeast 47th Street. And they actually have another one that's going to be on Cape Coral Parkway at the Public Shopping Center. One will be in the morning and the other will be in the afternoon. We need to get blood in. We see it coming, the shortage, and it's real. Just to maintain the hospitals that we have, the 4 major and other being added, it takes about 800 units of blood per week just to maintain them. And now we're going to need more. So please come out, give some blood, enjoy a nice big juicy hamburger. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So anyone else wishing to speak during citizens' input? Seeing none, citizens' input's now closed. Council discussion, Councilmember Gunter.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. The individual that came up for the noise ordinance, as you're aware, Councilmember Nelson asked to take a look at that particular ordinance again, and she will be doing that and bringing it before this council for possibly a vote on restructuring that. At that time, we'll address whether we agree it needs to be redone or if we should leave it the way it is. One thing I will mention is we have to make sure there's several communities in this city that have voluntarily cut off the time for music. In some of those communities, you have Cape Harbor, which stops playing music at 10 o'clock. You have the Tarpon Point area that stops at 10 o'clock. You have the Tiki Hut, which is an establishment here in Cape Coral. They voluntarily turn their music off at 10 or 11, just depends on the day. And you have the Boathouse down at the Yacht Club. So when we're taking a look at this ordinance, we have to make sure that we understand that this is a citywide ordinance and that if we change what the existing ordinance is, there could be a possibility that these establishments and locations that I just mentioned could play music longer. So we have to make sure that we keep that in mind when we're looking at this ordinance. There may be a possibility we have to look at it just for the entertainment district only, or we may want to keep it the way it is where it's a citywide initiative. We'll see what that is when it comes forward, but I just wanted to mention that. As far as Tropicana Park, we've had many discussions on these parks over the last several months, and the only park that we keep talking about is Tropicana Park. And the old story, where there's smoke, usually there's some type of fire. And when you take a look at this, the young lady that came up and spoke about the rowing club, I agree with you 100%. I think it's a great organization. I think it's a need for the city. But we're a city of 120 square miles. What we have to ask ourselves, is it a need at that particular location? Now, I asked the city manager last week in our meeting if he could have staff bring forth some alternate locations. We haven't got that information yet, and I'm sure it's forthcoming. I think there is somewhere else in the city that they could be located and still offer the same service that they can provide at this particular location. When we started talking about the GO bond and putting it on for a referendum, one thing that we promised the citizens in the neighborhood parks is they could design their own park, because what is the need of the Northwest may not be the need in Sands Park or any of the other neighborhood parks. So we agreed to let the community in that area, the neighbors in that area, craft what they wanted to see in the park. And that particular neighborhood came up with a conception plan that they agreed to. And somewhere in the middle, we've decided to change that possibly. That's got to come before council for a vote for a lease for that particular location. Now, I will say that I feel that the referendum was for the residents to vote on to pay for that, for $60 million of park improvements. And with that understanding that the neighborhood could pick what they wanted there. Now, if we allow these two organizations to come into Tropicana Park, we are going to take some of the facility away from the community. I personally don't feel that's right. So when that lease comes up, I will vote no for the lease. Not because I don't think it's a good organization and they can provide an excellent service to the community. It's because we have 120 square miles in this city. I think that we can come up with a happy medium that will appease everyone. It will appease the neighborhood that lives in that facility, and we can still give a facility to the rowing club, which I think will be an asset for our community. We can do this. We don't have to pick the one spot. And I hope that staff will bring something forth that will be able to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cosner?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I also asked last week if we could get a memo outlining all the possible options or alternatives for a site for the kayak and rowing club, and I just would like to know when we can expect that.
This week?
This week?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Let's take it a step further and just ask, I mean, at this point in time, would it make sense to create one of those stakeholder groups and get representation from the different entities to maybe sit down together and look at different locations, if not this one, and see if we can't find a suitable solution that suits everybody. There's nobody saying we don't want to have a kayak or rowing club. There's no one saying that that shouldn't exist in our city. There's just an objection to this particular area. So maybe we need to have a stakeholder group put together that could sit down and look at those different areas and then come back to council.
We can do that. It wouldn't be this week. But what I can guarantee this week is that we'll identify through staff the alternate locations, present that to mayor and council, and then also determine who we'd like to see on a stakeholder group to resolve this to a conclusion.
Okay. Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. This Tropicana things have gotten so blown out of proportion, it's unbelievable. Both of those clubs do a lot for all of the citizens, including the Northwest residents. Somebody said metal storage building. I don't know where that one came from. We don't allow metal storage buildings in City Cape Coral. Whatever they put up is going to have to be approved, and it'll be done so at a public hearing, and everybody can have their input, what's going to happen. As far as safety, it really galls me that we're going to try to deny those two boating opportunities in this boating city because we've got idiots that go flying down that spreader illegally. I live there. I live right across the street from Tropicana Park. I'm looking forward to this. I really am. I boat. I was out there yesterday. Well, not yesterday. I'm sorry. I was out there on Saturday. And we had a boat coming down on plane going around that S-curve. I've got a fairly good-sized boat, and it was hard for me to get out of the way. So is it a safe area? Not particularly. But again, we've had conversations with the police department. They bolstered their marine patrol. They have more boats and more people now. And they have agreed to spend time concentrating on that particular spot. Slow the people down. Not just say slow down, give them tickets. Make them pay. You know, I think it's a good idea. I really do. And I'm going to negate Councilmember Gunter's vote because I think it should happen there. The one reason it's there, and you know, we don't have the whole city. We don't have 124 square miles of saltwater canals. We don't have other areas in the city that have a long run like that run going down by the Seven Islands. Those are two of the reasons that we're at that place. They'll be racing the longboats. Where are you going to race the longboats? Across Lake Kennedy? You know, we have to look at the whole picture. And a lot of people are worried that the city's going to be, you know, donating money to this or paying for this. No, this is a private entity that's going in there, and they're going to provide a service for the city. In fact, I'm hoping they become a Parks and Rec program. If you have a kayak, I'm sure that you can go over there and talk to the people and possibly store your kayak there. It's for public use, privately owned public use. These are 501c3 organizations. Neither one of them are allowed to make a profit legally. So they're not profit-making companies we're putting in on private or public land. That's not true. I'm sure that NWNA is going to be sending out another 50 to 60,000 memos on this thing, and they'll let you know when we're going to be talking about these various aspects of it, such as approving the lease, approving the buildings that are going in, that type of thing. Come to those meetings. That's where you have your chance for public input. That's why we have the lectern here with a microphone. So, you know, please don't believe everything you see on TV, read in the papers or whatever. You know, just come talk to me. I know what's going to go on there, so I'd be happy to share it with you. But when Sandra came up here, she takes care of the rowing clubs. So she will be happy to give you the information. Please don't stick your head in the sand on this one, guys. So, okay, John, with your big grin on your face? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Stout?
Yes, I had it suggested to me, since the city owns quite a few waterfront lots, that perhaps that should be where these clubs go. However, I can see a problem happening if it's in a residential area, because they will have homes surrounding, and therefore we're going to go through that same process of having the neighbors object. I'm not really familiar with Tropicana, but I am going to ask our Parks Director if she will show me the area, and I want to talk further to find out the problems. Having Councilmember Williams speak so authoritatively about, because he is a boater, and therefore, and that is his area of the city that he represents, I just want to become better educated. So before, you know, before there's a vote, I would like to learn more. So, Carrie, if you will set aside some time for me, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, let's move on to personnel actions, item 8D. Andrea?
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Andrea Russell, City Auditor. Here tonight to propose a restructure of the City Auditor's Office. So changes for the restructure include the reclassification of one assistant city auditor position to a deputy city auditor position, as well as a proposal for an information systems auditor. As the city continues to grow, more and more is being asked of the office, including department consults, audits, and special projects. And this restructure will help us better address the increasing demands on my office. We currently have only 3 auditors, which means there can only be 3 audits going on at one time. So any additional assignments must be worked in conjunction with any audits that are in progress. And we also do, in addition to audits, we work on follow-ups for our audit recommendations and special projects, as I had mentioned. And my auditors do an excellent job of multitasking and working on several projects at once, but we've learned recently if you throw one big project in there, it becomes very difficult for us to continue working on other audits and other projects, and they have to get put on hold. So there's also the ever-changing IT environment. Recent guidance that was issued on data reliability is quite extensive, and it would be a great benefit to have someone with an IT focus that could allow us to keep the work in-house rather than outsourcing, having the work done externally. The current hourly rate for our external auditors is $160 an hour, and I haven't been able to get an estimate from them. It's kind of funny, auditors trying to talk to other auditors. So I used an average of what our audits generally take, and that's anywhere from 500 to 700 hours. So if we, using these numbers, if we estimate that we had an external audit performed with a 600-hour scope, that would cost us approximately $96,000. The proposed starting salary for the IT auditor is $60,000. The fully loaded rate is with benefits is $83,000. Without another auditor, it's going to take us longer to complete tasks, and as I mentioned, some may have to get put on hold, or we may not be able to perform them at all, and then it would have to be outsourced, and thereby we'd incur anywhere from $96,000 to the estimate for a 700-hour audit would be $112,000. So I think this is going to be a good thing for our office and for the city to save us some money. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 19-20?
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? I think having an IT auditor is a great idea, especially in the light that recently we know there's been some IT attacks on different cities throughout the area, and I think it's just good that somebody can go in and look at what we're doing.
And our IT department does an amazing job as well, but it'll just be nice to have some outside assurance too and some assistance.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little slow on the button, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Andrea, I fully support what you're doing there, and you guys are doing a really good job.
Thank you.
I'm real happy with what's happening in the auditor's office. I think we should support you any way that we can and make life maybe a little bit easier. I don't know, but thank you. I appreciate what you're doing down there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Okay, let's go on to appointments to boards and committees. We have the South Cape Community Redevelopment Agency, 2 vacancies. Madam City Clerk?
Yes, Your Honor, before you today, we have 2 vacancies for the South Cape Community Redevelopment Agency. There were initially 3 applications received, but Daniela Fergan has asked to have her application removed from consideration. So I have one for Linda Biondi and one for Janice Kime. I believe they may be in the audience if you'd like to interview them.
I think everybody knows who they are. If I can get a motion to
I
nominate.
will move the appointment of both Linda and Janice.
And I'll second it.
Second that. Any other discussion? Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Next appointment needed to be made is the Municipal Fire Employees Pension Trust Fund. Board of Trustees. There is one vacancy, and I believe there are 2 applicants.
There are 2 applicants, and both applicants are here today. If you would like me to call them up to the podium for an interview.
Yes, please.
Okay. William Patrick Long.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I've worked as a public servant, being employed with municipalities for 40 years, and understand the importance of a strong and viable pension plan, not only for the employees, but also for the city. Especially as Cape Coral grows, it'll be imperative to continue to protect and strengthen the firefighters' pension plan, along with all the other pension plans the city offers, to be able to recruit quality personnel. I served as an elected trustee for the City of Fort Lauderdale General Employees Plan for 3 years through December 2017. I maintained my certification as a public pension trustee at my own cost through December of 2019. With this opportunity now available, I would like to use my education and experience to serve in a fiduciary role to benefit the city's fire department personnel and their beneficiaries. So I thank you very much for considering my application.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Long? Thank you.
Charles Zajicek.
It's Zychek. I attended the Citizens Academy about 1.5 years ago and saw all the wonderful things that are done by the city. And all that time I'm wondering, what can I possibly do? My education is in accounting. I spent 19 years as a financial advisor, and I spent 11 years in management at Wells Fargo Advisors. So I have reviewed I think that what you're asking of a trustee is somewhat what I did for 11 years in management, and that is review outcomes and make sure that they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and if they aren't, find out why. That's why I applied for volunteer for this position. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Zychek.
Thank you.
I think what we'll do is we'll poll council. We've got 2 names, Long and Zychek, and then we'll see where we're at.
Costin,
Long.
Coviello,
Zychek.
Gunter,
Long.
Stout,
Long.
Welsh,
Zychek.
Williams,
Long.
Kariosha.
Long.
That's 5 for Long and 2 for Zychek.
Okay, can I get a motion to appoint Mr. Long?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Costin,
Aye.
Coviello,
Aye.
Gunter,
Aye.
Stout,
Aye.
Welsh,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Kariosha.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to ordinances and resolutions. Public hearing, Resolution 10-20. Madam City Clerk, please read the title.
Resolution 10-20, a resolution of the City of Cape Coral, Florida, relating to the delivery and funding of fire protection services, facilities, and programs within the city, supplementing City Resolution 268-19, approving the imposition of fire protection assessments against certain real property and the addition of such real property to the assessment roll for fiscal year 2019 to 20, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Chris?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is an additional resolution performed for about 255 properties that were left off of the tax billing. They were included in the initial calculations, but if they were labeled as institutional or acreage, they just simply weren't turned into the tax collector. And so we would like to put that onto the tax rolls.
All right, let's open up public input. Anyone wishing to speak to Resolution 10-20, please come forward. Seeing none, public input's now closed. Before we go to discussion, could I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Councilmember Cosden.
Thank you, Mayor. So Chris, does this mean that these people, this small number of properties, they'll receive a separate bill? It didn't go into the property taxes in November?
Correct. So on December 20th, we mailed out to those property owners a letter explaining what happened, that there would be a public hearing, which is what we're having now to discuss the correction of that error.
Will there also be an explanation with the bill that we send again?
There absolutely can be. I'm not sure if that's provided for in here, but if that's the wish of council, we'll certainly provide that.
I think that would be a great idea. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on. Resolution 5-20. Madam City Clerk, please read the title.
Resolution 5-20, a resolution providing for the vacation of plat for a portion of the Cape Coral Spreader Waterway and Buda Canal rights-of-way and all underlying easements located adjacent to Lot 1, Block 5961, Cape Coral Unit 93, and Tract 5961-B, Block 5961, Cape Coral Spreader Waterway, providing for the vacation of plat for public utility and drainage easements associated with Lot 1, Block 5961, Unit 93, Cape Coral Subdivision, and Tract 5961-B, Block 5961, Cape Coral Spreader Waterway. Property located at 2712 Southwest 29th Court, providing an effective date.
Thank you. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, so anyone wishing to speak or provide testimony must be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. For the record, Mike Struve, Planning Team Coordinator with the Planning Division. My credentials are on file with the City Clerk's Office. This is the first of two privately initiated vacation requests you'll be hearing about this evening. This particular request, there are two owners and two applicants involved, George Thomas and Lynn Edwards. They're requesting two vacations. One, they're requesting to vacate 216 square feet of canal right-of-way, as well as all underlying easements for a portion of the Cape Coral Spreader Waterway in the Buda Canal. And then secondly, adjacent to that right-of-way area, the applicants are seeking to vacate 159 square feet of platted easements. This particular site is located at 2712 Southwest 29th Court, which is in western Cape Coral. This is an aerial map of the site. You'll see that this property is irregularly shaped because it's at the end of a cul-de-sac. The site is unimproved except for a seawall that was constructed in 2018. The site has single-family residential zoning, as do all properties in the immediate vicinity of the site east of the Spreader Waterway. It's a fairly substantial site, over 17,000 square feet in area. As I mentioned earlier, the site is unimproved to this day except for the presence of that seawall. And the owners are seeking to vacate right-of-way and easements near the western property line of the site. These next couple of slides better depict visually what the applicant's requests consist of. This one shows the right-of-way area as well as the underlying easements indicated in the red filled-in area that the applicant is seeking to vacate, and that consists of 216 square feet in area. And I might add at this point that This is not part of the canal proper. This is not part of the wet area of the canal, if you will. This is all upland area. Secondly, the applicant is seeking to vacate 159 square feet of platted easements east of that existing right-of-way area, which occupies the applicant's property. The applicant has met all of the city's minimum requirements for vacation applications, which includes demonstrating ownership of the land for which the vacations are sought. They have provided the city with letters of no objection from the three utility providers. And then lastly, they have provided the city with sketches and accompanying legal descriptions showing the areas requested to be vacated. Staff has analyzed this request consistent with Section 3.4.5 of the Land Development Code, and we've summarized our findings here on this slide. The right-of-way and the easement areas to be vacated are isolated and relatively small in nature. Both the right-of-way and the easements are under 250 square feet in area. Since the right-of-way consists of upland area, this right-of-way is not needed for transportation purposes, particularly for boats that may be moving up and down the spreader waterway. The right-of-way will have no negative effect on boater visibility in either canal. And because of the isolated nature of this right-of-way, staff finds that there is really no future benefit for the city to maintaining stewardship of this right-of-way area. The easements, platted easements that the applicants are seeking to vacate are not needed, as the owners will provide replacement easements for maintaining a continuous perimeter easement around the site. A sketch of that is included in your backup information for this case. And then lastly, staff finds that this request will not be harmful neither to the subject property nor to surrounding property owners. Staff recommends approval of all requested vacations. A public hearing was held on this case before the hearing examiner on November 5th, and the hearing examiner recommended approval of the requested vacations with staff conditions. Those conditions do appear in Resolution 5-20 before you this evening. There were no speakers at public input, and earlier we did receive one phone call from the public from an individual that just wanted a little bit more information about the vacation process. And I'll stand by in case you have questions.
Thank you. Now open up public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on Resolution 5-20, please come forward. Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Let's go on Resolution 6-20. Madam City Clerk, please read the title.
Resolution 6-20, a resolution providing for the vacation of plat for the platted public utility and drainage easements located between Lot 31, Block 5961, Unit 93, Cape Coral Subdivision, and Tract 5961-A, Cape Coral South Spreader Waterway. Property located at 2929 Southwest 27th Street, providing an effective date.
Thank you.
Good evening, Justin Heller at the Cape Coral Planning Division. This is a...
Hold on one second. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and you must be sworn in before we provide testimony. Raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, this is a request to vacate 1,347 square feet of platted easements at a property located at 2929 Southwest 27th Street. Here's a current aerial of the property, which is vacant. The property has single-family zoning and future land use. So the applicant is requesting to vacate a portion of two 6-foot wide easements. These are between Lot 31 and Tract 5961A. The city does not require that the applicants vacate these easements. They are internal easements, which you can normally build over. However, in certain circumstances, there could be potential questions from a title company, lender, or insurer unfamiliar with our city procedures about the legality of building over these platted easements. So they are requesting to vacate them for those reasons. This is the sketch showing the two easements to be vacated. So our analysis finds that the utilities are absent in all the easements. The utility providers do not object to the request, and the easements will not provide a future transportation, public access, water management, or other foreseeable public benefit. Staff is recommending approval with conditions, and the hearing examiner recommends approval with conditions as well, and the hearing was held on November 5th. We did receive one phone call and one email previously for additional information only. And I stand by for any questions you may have.
Thank you. I'll now open up public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on Resolution 6-20, please come forward. And you need to be sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Scott Hertz. I'm the representative for the applicant. Everything is correct in the resolution. I just wanted to just bring to your attention, there just appeared to be a minor typo in the staff presentation on the first slide. If I can bring it back to your attention. I'll let you. Just the owner's name, I think, was inadvertently not corrected. I just don't want there to be any confusion in the record about who the applicant was. That should read Manfred and Gisela Waldinger. It is correct in the resolution, which is what's going to get recorded. I don't think that's any major impact. I just don't want there to be any confusion about who the applicant was here tonight. Other than that, the applicant agrees with all the conditions and things that were set forward at the hearing examiners and requests your approval of the vacation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else wishing to speak on Resolution 6-20? Seeing none, public hearing's closed. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Let's go on to items 9B, introductions. Ordinance 1-20. Madam City Clerk, please read the title, set the public hearing date.
Ordinance 1-20, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cape Coral, Florida, amending the Charter, Article 4, Government, Section 4.03, Election and Terms, amending the date for the primary elections to be held on the Tuesday 11 weeks prior to the general election, providing for severability and an effective date. The public hearing will be February 3rd, 2020.
Thank you. Okay, any ordinance 2-20, Madam City Clerk, read the title, set the public hearing date.
Ordinance 2-20, an ordinance amending the City of Cape Coral Comprehensive Plan by amending the future land use map from Pine Island Road District to single-family residential land use for property described as lots 1 through 52, Block 3682, and lots 1 through 55, Block 3685, all in Unit 50, Cape Coral Subdivision, property located on Southwest 19th Avenue and Southwest 18th Court, north of Pine Island Road and south of Southwest 4th Street, providing severability and an effective date. The public hearing will be February 3rd, 2020.
Thank you. Any discussions? Okay, let's go on to ordinance 3-20. Madam City Clerk, please read the title, set public hearing date.
Resolution 3-20, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Cape Coral, Florida, approving the purchase of office supplies, products, and related services from Office Depot, Inc., in accordance with City of Tamarack Contract 19-12R, authorizing the city manager or his designee to execute the purchase and orders of any related documents. Your Honor?
Yeah, wasn't that already?
That doesn't look accurate. I apologize. If you'll give me just a moment.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was already approved on last week's consent agenda.
Ordinance 3-20. An ordinance amending Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 2, firefighter pension to implement the conclusive cancer presumption established by Section 112.1816 Florida statutes and the rebuttal disease presumptions under Section 112.18, 112.181, and 175.231 Florida statutes, create Section 2-122.7D of the City Code relating to in-line of duty death benefits, and amends Section 2-122.8B of the City Code relating to in-line of duty disability benefits, and providing an effective date. The public hearing will be February 3rd, 2020.
Any discussion? Okay, let's go on to ordinance 4-20. Is that's different, right?
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Ordinance 4-20, an ordinance of the City of Cape Coral, Florida, amending Chapter 2, Article 6, Division 2, firefighter pension to increase the maximum pension, amending Section 2-122.6C of the City Code relating to benefit amounts and eligibility, providing for inclusion in the code, providing for severability, providing for a repealer, and providing for an effective date. The public hearing will be February 3rd, 2020.
Thank you. Any discussions? Ordinance 5-20. Madam City Clerk, please read the title, set the public hearing date.
Ordinance 5-20, an ordinance amending the City of Cape Coral official zoning district map of all property within the limits of the City of Cape Coral by rezoning property described as lots 1 through 60, Block 3786, Unit 52, Cape Coral Subdivision, as more particularly described herein, from commercial to single-family residential zone. Property is located at 2200 through 2312 Northwest 8th Terrace and 2201 through 2313 Tropicana Parkway West, providing severability and an effective date. The public hearing will be February 10th, 2020.
Thank you. Go on resolution 25-20. Madam City Clerk, please read the title, set the public hearing date.
Resolution 25-20. A resolution affirming with modifications, or reversing the decision of the hearing examiner rendered on September 12, 2019 in SE Hex Order 6-2019 that granted amendments to the site and landscaping plans associated with Resolution 108-15, which granted a special exception for an automotive service establishment use in order to operate a car wash in the South Cape downtown zone on real property described as lots 1 through 7 and 24 through 30, Block 363, Unit 7, property located at 1707 Cape Coral Parkway East, providing an effective date. The public hearing will be February 3rd, 2020.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on item 10, unfinished business, water quality, Mr. Klingon.
Thank you, Paul Klingon, Public Works. The level in Lake Okeechobee is about 13 feet. Hasn't changed a lot since last week. Average historical is 14.75. Last year was about half a foot lower. They continue to do the pulse releases of 650 CFS. When I say they, the U.S. Army Corps. Last year, about 1,000 CFS. There's been limited accumulation of blue-green algae has been observed at, there was a mistake on the memo. It said Elva, but that should be the Davis boat ramp and upstream of the Franklin Lock. But there was no toxins detected. And red tide has not been detected in Lee County for the past 2 weeks.
Thank you. Any questions? 10B, follow-up items for councilors. Anybody have anything to follow up? Okay, let's move on to the next item. Lisa Senego. We've got some information regarding recruiting firms for search for the city manager.
Lisa Senego, Human Resources Director. Uploaded in your packet were 3 quotes for executive search firms, all very qualified. We're also on the ICMA Association list of executive search firms, which that was also attached for you. So I don't know if you all had an opportunity to look through those 3. I believe this would be your time to discuss those 3, and I do have some questions and some things that can help direct moving forward, but the thought would be to secure someone and secure that contract throughout this week. And it would be posting until filled with a placement no later than October 2020. That's to allow for the overlap of the retiring CM as he previously announced in 2019 as the latest kind of start date. That was my assumption, that you wanted to, at minimum, have a month overlap in that scenario.
Councilmember Cosden?
Thank you, Mayor. Lisa, which of these firms did Cape Coral use in recent history?
We have utilized Colin Basinger in this. We have in the past also used a colleague that he utilizes as well, which is W.D. Higginbotham, which is Mercer, and W.D. has since passed away this past spring. Yeah. So, but Colin Basinger, I have them in alphabetical order for you. So we have utilized him historically, and he has done quite a few in his firm in the Florida area. And the other 2 are also national. They are a national firm, but the other 2 are also national firms.
Okay. Going through his proposal, I liked his the best, and now knowing that he's helped us in the past, I think I would lean towards Mr. Basinger. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I was also very impressed with that proposal, the amount of placements that they've done, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout the country, and in the city manager position was one of their areas they seem to accent. Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. The other thing we need to do as a group is to set the parameters, like relocation expenses that we're willing to pay and that type of thing. That's probably got to be done fairly soon. I hope that we're going to be able to get somebody. After what we did to this poor gentleman last Monday, it's going to be hard to get somebody to take that job. So I hope that we can get a good candidate that's willing to move and work with us. But both of the firms, the one that Councilman Cosden just mentioned, I've dealt with them in one of the past hiring, and they were very easy to work with. So I would go along with that one.
You all done?
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Gunter?
Thank you. I also agree. Looking at all 3 of these firms, I think the Collin firm would be the best choice. If you take a look at what they've done in the past, the 3rd firm that's listed on our paperwork, I only saw an assistant city manager position filled by them. There was no city manager ever filled by the information that was given to us. So I didn't really feel that that would be the best firm. The other 2 firms, you have one, I believe, from Arizona, the other firm from Florida. Since the firms from Florida, they hopefully would have a little better insight to what we're looking for. And also, since we've already had a past business relationship with them, I think that's the best firm. So that would be my vote.
Thank you. Also, on the last quote, I couldn't find a price. I don't know if anybody saw that.
$22,500.
On the last one?
Yeah, they were
Okay.
the cheapest, but I didn't think they were the best quality.
Someone want to make a motion that we approve
I'll make that motion.
Colin Banzinger?
Yes, I'll make that motion for approval.
Second.
Have a second? Any other discussion?
Yes, I have a question. When we replaced the superintendent at the charter schools about 5 years ago, do you know which firm that was. They really did do a good job. I just wondered whether they were, I don't remember the name of the firm, so I'm just not sure.
I am not remembering that name of the firm, but I do believe that that was more school-related.
Okay.
And a different venue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we want to also include in that motion the amount of relocation expense? Councilmember Gunter?
May I speak to that?
Yes, go ahead.
Possibly. We do have, thank you, I just wanted to pipe in, we do have, thank you for bringing that up, both council members, is we do have an ordinance that states $5,000 for relocation. That was one of the things I wanted to make sure I stated for you this evening. So that is $5,000. In addition to that, we do, the search firm that you all have does all their expenses for the search firm, ads, postings, things along that line. The city will also bring down candidates that you want to interview. We'll pay for their transportation fees for themselves and a partner, and 2 evenings, hotel, and food per diem for 2, and car rental. So they have an opportunity to experience the Cape and spend the time that you need with them in the interview process, that the search firm will guide you through what that process would be. So I hope that assists, because we do have an ordinance that states up to $5,000 reimbursable upon receipts.
Madam City Attorney?
Thank you. We do have an ordinance that talks about the relocation expenses, but with a city manager candidate, that's going to, or when you ultimately select a city manager, a lot of that will be subject to the contract that you enter into with that selected candidate at that time.
Thank you. We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Cosden?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Kyriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Okay, let's go on to the addendum update on the administrative investigation regarding services and cost.
If,
Oh, I'm
I
sorry. Did I
apologize.
jump?
If I just to clarify, thank you very much, just to clarify on this. So the acceptable proposal based on the historical here, insight into what we're looking for possibly in the Florida area of the 3 proposals, the acceptable proposal is the Basinger proposal based on those items. Okay.
Correct.
May I confirm a few things with you as we move forward, that our office manager, your office manager, Jessica Cosden, Councilmember Cosden, will be the contact for this. That's what we have done for other recruitments in the past?
Correct.
Okay.
Everybody good?
And anytime there's a big decision or whatever,
Right.
I'll bring it to the council, right?
Right.
If there's
It just
anything that I
things,
think we need to,
the firm needs a point of contact.
I'll be the point person.
And HR contact would be myself, and then we have Dave Anderson, which I think most of you have met, our talent acquisition manager. And then would that be Ms. Taylor or Ms. Gergen as an admin contact?
Good with that?
Connie or Pearl?
Yes.
Administrative?
Either one is fine?
Either one.
Okay. And then we talked about the relocation, and attorney gave you some options with that. And the first decisions that you will ultimately be looking at are the posting, what would they call the posting brochure, which is the description of the position, et cetera. And there are some things in the charter that outline the city manager, some of the city manager duties. There's not a job description for that. It is a contract position. And so I can forward that charter piece to you all that has in there. So that will be one of the first things that they'll be looking for. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Any questions? Okay, let's go on to addendum D, the update on the UEP North 2 and 1.
Thank you, Paul Klingon, Public Works. I'll be doing the executive summary, then turn it over to Kevin Higginson, the Extension Manager. So Southwest 6 and 7, North 2 and North 1 areas have been approved by City Council. It's over $500 million for those 3 areas. It's one of the largest utility programs in the United States. The assessment methodology has been the same for Southwest 6, 7, North 2, and North 1. North 2 is presently under budget. We anticipate a North 2 UEP refund. We had a Southwest 6 and 7 UEP refund of $524 per equivalent parcel for all three utilities, water, sewer, and irrigation. North 2 construction did have some time extensions that were approved, primarily due to material and labor shortages. As far as the material, there's a lot of pipe, there's a lot of concrete structures that have to be made. We also have what's called a DPO, a direct purchase order, that we, through the contractors, will purchase the material and will save the 6% sales tax. And in North 2, that was approximately a savings of $2 million. Then certainly all the contractors have been experiencing the labor shortages with the economy, both for skilled and unskilled labor, moving, hiring, moving on, making more money. So that's been a struggle for the contractors. North 2 is similar to previous UEPs and all utility and road construction projects. Certainly, we do have complaints, and they're mostly related to dust in the dry season, mud in the rainy season, and traffic detours. The North 2 UEP, we are on the verge of completing. The utilities notice of availability letters will be going out phased in January, February, and March, and also known as the plumber's connections. So that's the connections the homeowners do from the right-of-way to their homes. So that's good news, so we're coming to an end here. As far as North 1, the city will be meeting with the Northwest Neighborhood Association on North 1, as we will all citizens' public meetings. North 1, Kevin will give a little bit more detail. We're looking at possibly, because of the size of North 2, possibly splitting that North 1 UEP based on roads and parcels, and Kevin will get into a little bit more detail on that. So Kevin's going to give a background and history on the assessments, just a quick one, and a little more detail on North 2, and then he'll discuss the North 1, possibly splitting it into 2 assessment areas.
Thank you, Paul. For the record, Kevin Higginson, Utilities Extension Manager. Good evening. Okay. All right, so this is a map of the city, obviously, and it shows the existing service area for the utility system of about 70,000 parcels. We added about 6,400 parcels with the Southwest 6-7 UEP. Currently under construction, North 2, we're adding about 8,800 additional parcels. And then with North 1, we'll add another 7,400 parcels. Just a little background on the assessments. We've used the same methodology for Southwest 6 and 7 and North 2, and we would anticipate using a similar methodology for North 1 for consistency and fairness. And the assessments are broken up into 2 primary components, line extension, which is based on the square footage of the property, and that pays for the collection and distribution system improvements, typically mains that are 8 inches and smaller in diameter. And then the capital facility expansion charge is for the treatment and transmission system, and that's 10-inch diameter and larger mains, as well as pump stations, et cetera. There's essentially 2 ways to pay the assessments. You can prepay them for water, sewer, and/or irrigation, or you can pay them through annual installments on your tax bill. And then just a little bit about funding. We have secured SRF loans through FDEP, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Those loans are as low as 0.04%, and in the less than 2% range for the higher end. We also have some funding through grants and other city funds, but the primary funding is through the SRF loans. And then we would look to continue a similar approach for North 1. And we're also looking at other avenues such as bonds. This is just a little history of the pricing for assessments in the last few UEPs that have been completed or in progress in the city. You can see there's been sort of a steady rise in assessment amounts. These are not adjusted for inflation. It's the line work assessment for a standard 10,000 square foot lot is what's represented on the graph. We had a very high assessment for Southwest 4 compared to the others, and then a lower one for Southwest 6-7, which we think, we've got really good prices due to coming out of the recession. But you can see that the assessment for North 2 is right in line with kind of the average for all three utilities throughout the history of the UEP program since around 2002. This next map shows the size and magnitude of North 2. You can see that it spreads from the western boundary of the city at the Spreader Waterway, Old Burnt Store Road, all the way to the east, actually past Del Prado. We have a small part of the project. It's about 7 miles across. So it's large, it's expansive. We have large transmission mains. And then just looking at North 1, you can see it's a lot more compact. It's smaller in size as well as being more compact. Excuse me. North 2 was initially a little bit smaller than it is now. Council approved an addition of the area north of Embers Parkway so that we could get up to the Bonefish Canal, which is the green area that you see within the yellow box. And then we also added the area that's in orange, and that actually extends all the way up to the Hermosa Canal, and that allowed us to serve the entire 7 islands, as well as complete the widening of Old Burnt Store Road from the existing 2-lane undivided in that area to the 2-lane divided with bike lanes that is consistent with the areas to the south and north of the project. Because it's such a large project, it requires a large team and a team approach. Back in 2015, the city hired Greeley and Hansen as a consultant to perform permitting and design and bidding of the project, and then we added some additional services to their contract for construction engineering and inspection and construction management in 2017. They have a large team, a lot of inspectors. We have environmental consultants, public involvement specialists, materials testing companies as well that are assisting the city in completing the project. We issued notice to proceed to the contractors for construction of the project starting in October of 2017. And because of the number of contracts that we have, we spread those out and kind of staggered the start dates and started the last ones in March of 2018. As Paul mentioned in the executive summary, we have issued some contract time extensions related to delays that the contractors have incurred due to primarily to material and labor shortages. Just because of the economy that we've been in for the last couple of years, it's been very difficult for them to properly staff the project to meet the timeframes that were required. I would say that just as a comparison, the production rate that the contractors had in Southwest 6-7 was about $4.3 million per month. And in North 2, our production rate has been almost $8 million per month. So almost double the production rate that we've been able to sustain throughout the project length. And then also, we have had a number of complaints. We do have the public information specialists that gather all the complaints, as well as just comments from the public. We address those as quickly as we can, and we work with the contractors and our consultant to address those issues. A lot of them are related to dust, mud, traffic issues, access to properties. This just shows a map of North 2 and shows how we've split up the contracts. In Southwest 6-7, we had 7 line work contracts. In North 2, we have 11. We have 7 contractors working on those 11 because 4 of them have 2 contracts. We are nearing completion. We have approximately 98 miles of roadway in the project area, and we're about 95% done with the first lift of pavement. So we're wrapping up with those last 4 or 5 miles of roadway, and then in the meantime, we do have some areas that are ready. We should be sending out notices of availability starting this month, and we'll stage those over the next 3 months. So January, February, and March, we expect to have everyone notices so that they can start hooking up to our utility system. And once a resident or homeowner receives a notice of availability, they will have 180 days to connect to the water, sewer, and/or irrigation system, which is what we call plumber's connection. And as we complete areas with the plumber's connections, after that 180 days has transpired, we will come back in and place a second lift of pavement along the roads. This next map just gives you a graphical representation of the areas where we expect to send out notice of availability in the next 2 months. The areas in yellow should be receiving their notices in January or February, and the areas in green, if you can see that, should be receiving their notices in March of this year. In terms of where we are on the budget, each contract, when they are approved by council, has a 7% city-controlled contingency fund with a total of 5% for the overall project. So each contract can have up to 7, but the overall project can have no more than 5%. So we have to manage that and make sure we fall within those limits. Right now, We are estimating that we will only use about 1.5% of that contingency limit. So instead of 5%, we believe it's going to be more like 1.5%. And that compares pretty closely to Southwest 6-7, which was at 1.44%. Overall, we expect to be under budget. We're anticipating a refund to our property owners that paid assessments. And you know, I don't have a number right now. Our number for Southwest 6-7 was $524. That was for all three utilities. And Paul mentioned the DPO savings. We have also, because of using the direct purchase order methodology that we use, where we purchase pipe materials and structure materials, we're able to save the city and our assessed property owners $2 million in sales tax savings that wouldn't have otherwise been saved had we allowed the contractors to just purchase that material. The North 1 UEP generally goes from Santa Barbara Boulevard on the west to Corbett Road on the east. The area to the south is already served, and then we go up just north of Kismet Parkway. We are presently in the negotiations phase with a national firm, Tetra Tech, for design, permitting, and bidding services. That design contract, is expected to be on a March agenda for approval by City Council. And the scope will include not only design, permitting, and bidding, but we'll be evaluating the contract phasing for North 1 to look at ways where we can address funding, assessments, bidding, as well as some issues that will hopefully address some of the concerns and issues that the residents have brought forward with construction means and methods, the dust and mud complaints, the maintenance of traffic, as well as construction contract time. We looked at some history on previous UEPs, just to kind of look at an order of magnitude for North 2 and North 1, and this next slide shows the size of the last few UEPs back to Southwest 1. And you can see where, and I believe before Southwest 1 through Southwest 5, when we had some of the orange and green, the colored UEP areas, the size of the areas were a little bit larger. Those got backed off to like a 3,600 to 4,300 parcel size for Southwest 1 through 5. I believe is related to the density of those areas, were higher density. And then when we went into Southwest 6-7, North 2 and North 1, we've gone with a little bit larger size assessment areas, partly to take advantage of economies of scale, but also to recognize that the density in those areas weren't quite as high as Southwest 1 through 5. And this next exhibit is similar, just kind of shows the miles of road per assessment area. They're ranging around 35 to 40 in the Southwest 1 through 5 areas, and it jumped up to 65 in Southwest 6 and 7, which is essentially 2 assessment areas. And then North 2, it jumped up again to 98 miles, and North 1's a little bit smaller, kind of between 6 and 7 and North 2, but it's still fairly large. So what we're doing, and it'll be part of our design process with our consultant, we'll be looking at the area, kind of breaking it down into the size of specific areas. We'll look at how we're going to serve areas with sewer, which kind of controls the size of the contract areas. But we're looking at possibly breaking it into 2 phases. Which may involve 2 assessments approved by council. If we do break it into 2 phases, we are likely to increase the contract time by 1 to 2 years. If we go with 2 phases, we may increase the overall construction costs if we lose economies of scale. But and then there's some potentially different assessment rates in each one of those phase areas. But those would be things that we'll be looking at and managing and working with our consultant to come up with the best program to provide the best solution for our property owners that are assessed, as well as the traveling public, and completing the projects in a reasonable amount of time. I also want to mention that we will be meeting with NWNA and other concerned citizens to discuss specific concerns that they have from North 2 and possibly previous UEPs, and working to address those as part of the North 1 design phase. The proposed schedule for North 1, assuming we are able to bring the design contract to council and get it approved in March, we would expect to start design in April of 2020. We're shooting to have assessments ready for council review in the summer of 2021, depending on how we phase the project. And then construction, also depending on the phasing, would be anticipated to be summer of 2021 through 2023. And that concludes our presentation, and we're available for any questions you have.
Kevin, I got a question. One of the things that you said happened on the previous project, North 2, was we didn't have enough material and there were labor shortages. And that was part of the reason why that project extended, along with the fact that there were 13 different contractors. And I want to see that we try to avoid that in the future. How many contractors do you think are going to be on the North 1 project?
Well, that's one thing, one of the tasks that we'll have for the consultant that we'll be working with. They have done some analysis already as part of the selection process, and they've identified up to 10 contracts. So, but we'll be looking at that, trying to maximize the efficiency of the project, identifying connectivity between contract areas and trying to minimize the impact on the public as part of that analysis of how we divide the area into different contracts. Sure.
Could I weigh in? I think the 10 contracts were for the entire North 1 area. So if we split it, you'd have potentially 5 contractors, or 5 contracts.
Right, because I think what the residents are looking for, that we don't extend their area to go on for over a year, or in some cases longer, that, we try to get in and get out. I mean, that might unfortunately increase the cost a little bit, but the inconvenience that some residents experienced is what we want to tackle. And I think we want to look at that next project to say, maybe we only have 5 contractors that we can oversee. Because if you're having material shortages and you're having labor shortages, that means we're just doing too much at one time.
Correct.
Okay, so-
And certainly going in north too, the economy just went crazy, and as far as private development, other municipal projects, so certainly that's something we can look at. If you can put the slide back up, the slideshow. Thank you. You can see here with the miles of roads, when Southwest 1 through Southwest 5 was done, it was about 40 miles of road. North 1's about 80. So split that in half, you're back to that same construction
Same
sizes
size,
that
basically.
were done before.
The other question I had regarding the production rate of 8 million per month, you compared it to the previous projects, which was about half that. Could you explain that a little further as far as what that means?
What it means is, or how that's calculated, is just adding up the number of pay requests, the amount of pay requests we've received, or the value of those pay requests divided by the construction time.
Okay.
So if we've had, let's say, $10 million worth of work done in a given month, that's the production rate.
Thank you. Councilmember Gunter.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things. First off, I didn't see a map in your presentation. You said we've paved, as far as the first lift on the roadways, about 95% of that. The other 5% that is left, can you give us a time frame when that other 5% will be completed?
Yes, we expect all of it to be completed within the next 2 months.
Okay.
And that's how we'll be able to send out the notice of availability. We have to have all the roads paved, all the utilities in and ready to connect.
I think not one of the problems, but the main problem is when you tear the road up for the resident to the time the first layer is put back down. To me, that's the critical time that we have to look at. And I would hope with our future design here that we'll maybe approach this with that type of methodology, because that is exactly what impacts that particular resident on that particular street. So I think we need to take a look at this and say, from point A to point B, we have to come up with a goal in order how we can get that first layer of asphalt put down for that particular area. So we don't stretch it out so far. I think why most of the residents are getting upset is, you tear up the street and it's over a year before you get that first layer down. I would rather compress that construction project to a specific area and move on accordingly before we just stretch it out too far. And I think that's what we've done here with this particular project. Hopefully we've learned from our mistakes. And I think a lot of it has to do in the design phase, making sure we have a good formula going forward so we have the best outcome and the quickest outcome for the resident. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Cosner.
Thank you, Mayor. As a resident living in a UEP area, I'm in, I think it's contract 10, maybe 11. I can tell my colleagues that I do have complaints about the process, my house shaking, the road being torn up, boil water notice, things like that. But my biggest issue as a resident, and my neighbors too, is the length of time. It's been 17 months since construction started, almost 17 months. And that is not going to be acceptable for the next area. So I hope we're doing a lot to put into the contracts. I understand we gave extensions this time around, but I don't want to see that again. I don't want to see residents sitting for a year and a half with their roads torn up, wondering when they're going to finally get their utilities. So I know that we can do better, and I'm just urging you. Thank you.
Councilmember Stout.
Yes, will you roll your slides back to the one that shows all of the UEP expansion areas where you had the number of parcels? Yes, that's the one. My husband and I have paid for 3 utility expansions since we've lived here. We've lived here 38 years. And the first one isn't even on this map. It was referred to as 8 Lakes. And it was done in 1980, 81, when we moved here. And fortunately, it was completed by the time we moved in, but we still paid for it. The next one was while I was on council the first time, and it was 6 contracts, but 4 construction firms. So a couple of the construction firms had 2 contracts. And that one is the 70,000 parcels that is shown. That's why I asked them to roll it back. And I can tell you it was over 2 years. And there were all kinds of lawsuits that the city had to pay for after everything was completed. The next one is the one when we lived on just off of Surfside. And I don't remember whether we were 1 or 2, but it was very reasonable as far as we were concerned, having because we saw what the center city, that's what I call the 70,000 parcels, was kind of center city. And so it was much better than what we saw in the early 90s. That was the early 90s. And we also had a rental home in Area 6. That one went, well, I'm thinking it was pretty close to 2 years. But the reason I thought that there was so much trouble with North 2 was because I heard Waste Pro talking about the fact they couldn't hold on to drivers because the economy was so good that if somebody could get another job for 25 cents an hour or more, they took another job. And so I thought, my thought was, with the economy being so good, maybe that was what caused at least part of the problems in North 2. I don't know all of them other than the fact that weather came into play, but I do hope that when we do North 1, that we've learned something from what happened in North 2 to alleviate some of the problems. Whenever there's a utility expansion, though, it's never going to be a fun time if you're living there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, well, you and I have been out in that area up there, and I'm right in the middle of all this. I think the problem that we had with North 2 is it was too much, with too many contractors doing the same thing. It's like the day when they started it, somebody sent a message out, start, and 10 earth movers are digging up roads all over the city, never to be filled back in again for another 2 or 3 years. The frustrations I had were the detours. I don't think the signage was adequate. I remember I got over by Krista McAuliffe's school, and I ended up driving across an empty field to get out of there. That's the only way I could find a way to get out. There was just no signage. It was a detour sign. I went into the detour, and nothing, a big vacuum. Most of the complaints I got was, this road's been dug up for 3 years. I know when they dig it up, it's obviously, they had to dewater a lot, which they probably didn't expect. But once the pipes are in the ground, why can't we just fill the hole and at least they'll have a dirt road to drive on instead of having a trench dug or, it just seems like they're digging and not filling anywhere, and it gets real frustrating. Old Burnstone Road, and especially when you're digging at Tropicana Park, it was a disaster. It really was. It's getting better now. I know you guys are trying to get it paved, but it's still, the time of the road being torn apart just is not acceptable. You know, just dig the hole, put the pipes in, fill it up with dirt, and when you get to paving it, you get to paving it. So I mean, that would be my suggestion. One question I have, I don't know where I am. I'm just north of Tropicana on Old Burn Store Road. I didn't see that on North 1. It's not in North 2. You're stopping just before you get to me. Is that North 3? Do you have a North 3 or?
As far as right now, council has approved the 6-7 North 2 and North 1. We're working with the utilities department and doing a master plan, and we'll be coming back to council. So those designations that were North 3 through 8 may change, and I think we've talked about this in the past, that there's that horseshoe, that there's a lot less density in the middle. So either it's going to head up Del Prado, or it's going to head up Burnt Store area for water quality and development there. So after that master plan is done, we'll be coming back to council to prioritize basically 3 through 8. Now those areas 3 through 8 were bigger areas, and if we cut them in half, you potentially have 14 more assessments. I did the math
I'm
right.
getting a lot of people
12 more, sorry.
live up in the north, and a lot of them are in the middle of the horseshoe, asking, when are you going to do me? When's it coming up here? And I just tell them to go onto our website and look there. But I figured while I had you standing here, I'd ask about this one anyway. So there will be one beyond North 1. North 1 isn't the end of it.
I'm sorry.
After North 1, it'll be something, North 3 or something like that, and that'll probably
It's
be
to
on my
be
side again.
determined
Yeah.
through the utility master plan process, and will be brought forward to council for approval.
And again, we'll obviously look at that with economic development, water quality, you know, where do we want these utilities to end up? But we all know that in the middle, there's a lot less density. So like I said, we're either thinking that it'll head north of North 1, or we'll be heading up the Old Burn Store Road area.
That is very important, because the Burnt Store Road is ripe for development right now, commercial development, which we really, really need. And I don't know why they didn't run it up there when they were building the road. And also, when you get up around Wilmington and north of Festival Park and the Zemmel area up there, there's empty land up there that we can really start building our commercial base.
And just so you know, when we've been, as far as Lee County extending up Burnt Store Road, actually utilities and UEP got together with them and coordinated putting in sleeves with the anticipating.
Can't run water through a sleeve.
Right, so we don't have to dig that up.
Yeah. No, I wish they had just put the pipes in the road and gotten it done with, but it is what it is. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Gunter?
Thank you. Just a quick question. I know you guys are working on the UEP master plan, which will probably define the remaining part of the city. When can we expect to see that?
I'm going to ask Jeff Pearson, Utilities Director, to talk about the schedule on that.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jeff Pearson, Utilities Director. We've got the PO cut. It's been approved by council. It's going to be about 18 months to get that done. Master plans are a living document. We have a master plan now, as they were discussing those old 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When that was done, there was a lot less development in that area. A master plan has to be revisited on a regular basis. I would suggest at least every 10 years, because you never know, things change, development changes, like who would have guessed that, development was going to go up Del Prado or up Burnt Store 10 years ago. So it's something that we will continue to look at. I do believe that, as it was previously mentioned, that that Del Prado corridor and that Burnt Store corridor have a higher density level. We have to have at least, my recommendation is at least 30% build out before you go in and spend millions of dollars on infrastructure. Also, we have to have the demand for the water to keep the water quality fresh. Otherwise, we're going to have all kinds of operational problems if we were to go in there and build a bunch of lines with no users. Then you have a lot of issues keeping the disinfection residuals up in the pipe. We have to maintain a certain 0.02 milligrams per liter at all times. Otherwise, we'd have boil water notices everywhere if we couldn't maintain that. Or we're going to be flushing millions of gallons of water a day, probably flushing more than we're selling. So we have to be very strategic as to when and where the timing of going to that next big area. Thank you.
So if I hear you correctly, your answer was 18 months? We should be getting that.
Yes, we should have that completed and have a better idea of prioritization of the next areas beyond North 1 UEP.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, you had an excellent explanation, why we need the density. I thought it was closer to 50%, but that 30% is fine.
At a minimum.
But my question is, I'm not saying do another north. I mean, like going up Burnstone Road, don't do North 4, North 5, or whatever. It doesn't have to be a big project. Just run the mains. Run the mains up Burnstone Road. When the neighborhoods build up on either side of it, then you can do North 3A, North 3B, North, so forth, and do the neighborhoods when they get you get your percentages. But to just put in the mains, that's not going to require a lot of maintenance and a lot of flushing and everything. If you just, mains are this big, so I don't know. If we could at least be working towards something, and then people will say, yeah, let's look at Cape Coral, because they've got property. The only thing they're missing is utilities, but they're coming now, and let's look at that. But
well, right now we only have two ways. One is through an assessment.
Yeah.
That can be done. If, council directs staff to do that, we can certainly do that. But we have to have a way to pay for it because our existing customers cannot, bear that burden, or we could end up cause a rate increase.
No, I agree with that, absolutely.
So we have to be careful.
Absolutely, but that doesn't mean that a developer can't buy a piece of land, speculate on it, pay for the utilities, and then when he gets the commercial properties in there, he's going to get his money back.
Yes.
Multi-time.
That's the other way, through our SEAC program. Assessment and SEAC is the two ways that we can accomplish that. Yes, sir.
So, anyway, that was just my goal, my opinion. I hate to see it when you start digging up that brand new Burnstone Road, but that's life is life.
Well, preferably we won't. We'll stay out away from the road.
I hope.
Into the grass. We don't like pipe under the roads.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and,
All right.
and we should also mention, we actually put casings under Burnstone Road, so we should not have to dig up anything. We should be able to use the casings that we've already placed there.
Yeah, you can go under the roads. I know that, but I'm talking about the ones that hold the stuff. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, everybody. Let's go on Addendum E, Administrative Investigation regarding cost and services for Brown Law and Consulting. Madam City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brown Law and Consulting, Deborah Brown, has started her administrative investigation. She was in Cape Coral last week. One of the points that I wanted to bring up is the fact that she did start in the areas that are not having duplication currently with the FDLE investigation that is ongoing. But as council recalls from the letter of engagement that you had before you last week, there is an option to have the interviews transcribed for an additional charge. That additional charge is an additional $215 an hour for that transcription to occur. I am asking the council what your pleasure is with regard to the transcripts, having the interviews transcribed. In theory, you wouldn't have to decide this evening. You could decide later, but the advantage of deciding sooner is that you don't develop a stack of the interviews. You're able to move them along to be transcribed as they are being taken.
We don't have any idea how much time's involved with that?
Well, she's not done with the interviewing yet.
I understand that.
And she has not begun the part that is with FDLE, because there is a thought too that depending on what FDLE finds, there may be some decision made that to have her even go into those areas may be duplicative, but we won't know that until after FDLE moves forward on that part. I will say to you that it has been my observation that council members have seemed to have found a value in reading the transcripts of other investigations themselves, and so this is one that is even more within the purview of council to ultimately be evaluating the outcome of the investigation. So I think it may be, if you have found value in the past, I think that you are likely to find value in this case as well.
Councilmember Gunter?
Thank you, Mayor. Just like the city attorney stated, me personally, I found value in reading the transcripts. I think you get a better understanding of exactly what was said, how it was said. That would be my choice, is to have the transcript. I think we'd be able to decipher the information a little better.
Councilmember Cosden?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. I think that it's painful because $215 an hour is a lot, but I think we should get the transcriptions. And also, while I have the floor, Dolores, last week we talked about asking the investigator or seeking her opinion on whether or not the city manager should be placed on leave if she found anything that was necessary for that, and I just wanted to see if you had an update on that.
She has stayed with the discussion with Constantia Brooks, and their recommendation had been only regarding consistency. It's not something that you're obligated to do. That really had been pretty thoroughly discussed last time. It's really an option for the council, and she remains with that.
Thank you.
So consistency in which fashion?
Consistency in the sense that recently there has been a pattern of putting employees out on administrative leave / suspension with pay until the outcome of the investigation, but that is a decision for the council to make.
So that's been the protocol that's been utilized in most of this investigating that's been done up to this point?
I don't know about in most of what has been done. Council
Well,
is...
we have 3 people out on leave in the finance department based on a he said, she said. So she said's out, but he said's still here.
So as I said, this is a matter for the council. There has been, as the mayor has pointed out, there has been some recent tendency to, and for certain reasons, to place employees out on suspension with pay / administrative leave. It is a decision for council to make. Each one of these is a situation that you would evaluate in its own right, the same way that presumably each employee's investigation that has been handled has been evaluated in its own right. But it would be good to clarify whether or not today, whether we want the transcript to be done.
Okay. Councilmember Stout?
I'm going to lean toward the transcripts, because when I read all of the transcripts from the other investigation, it certainly helped me to determine the extent of what was alleged. And so consequently, as I think I mentioned, it was when I read our city attorney's transcript that I really had a better understanding of the issue. So yes, I will lean toward transcript.
Okay. Councilmember Kariosha?
I also would like to have a transcript, but I also know that we voted on last week the action to take in regards to who was going out and who wasn't. So I would appreciate, as a part of this dais, that once we vote on something like that, we don't keep rehashing it for whatever reason.
That was never voted on last week.
Yes, it was.
No, it wasn't. We never voted on putting the city manager out on leave. That was never voted on, okay? No, we voted on dismissal, but not leave. And we voted on the investigation to go forward without putting the city manager out on leave. That's what was voted on last week.
Can we ask the city attorney exactly what happened?
I'm going to defer to the city clerk, who I'm pretty confident has this information available before her.
If I could just have a moment to
Sure.
review the minutes from last week.
While you're doing that, I'm going to ask, Councilmember Karyosha, you still have the floor. Are you done?
I am, thank you.
I'm going to bring up our auditor, Andrea Botola. Could you take the stand, please? Because I'll tell you why I'm going down this road. It was brought to my attention that recently there was a request for proposal regarding the outsourcing of the maintenance at the golf course. Could you describe to me what's taken place with that this week? That was put out there and was bid on, and what happened?
Well, this week, I made the recommendation to stop the process based on consultation with our external auditor, Chris Kessler. I'm not sure how much more I can discuss because that's part of the information that was included in the certified letter. So I'm not, I would defer.
Well, that's my point. It was part of the investigative letter that was put out there, and now that request for proposal's been withdrawn?
It hasn't been withdrawn. I was on the evaluation committee with several other individuals, and we had some presentations scheduled that were supposed to occur this week, or last week, and one this week. And it was decided that we were going to stop any further meetings and that's more of a question for our procurement manager or our finance director as far as what's going on with the process. If the RFP's been rescinded, I'm not sure. I just made the
Wanda, could you come up to the podium, please? Tell us a little bit about this. It just came on a second or two ago.
It came on before you asked Wanda to go to the podium. I'd like to do the same thing. And while she's doing that, I'd like to indicate that Wanda Roop, as well as Chris, our finance director, they spoke with me. And what I want to ask them is to identify to mayor and council the reasons that a recommendation was made to suspend the RFPs. And I even have that in writing. So what I would like to do, Wanda, if you have that memo that you sent me, I'd like Wanda Roop to read the reason why the RFPs were suspended. The short version is because that memo that was written by Victoria Bateman was referenced at the DS, and we did not want to adversely impact anyone that may have seen the video come into an RFP meeting and possibly think that there was a tainting of the RFP process because a letter was written that was unsubstantiated. But I'd like to have...
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. We all received an email regarding this ongoing investigation. It was strongly requested by an investigator from Florida Department of Law Enforcement that we cease and desist any
Robert's Rules point of order allows us to talk freely up here. With the investigation, I understand. We're talking about, not impeding a investigation into an individual, because things like this will happen when we don't remove that person and put them on leave. And I've seen that time and time again in large corporate situations where it's done repeatedly. We did it to our finance director and several other people we've done it to. I think this calls to revisit that for whatever reason.
Well, now we're going into procurement. We're going into putting the auditor in the middle in regards to her knowing all of this is under investigation. I think it's inappropriate for us to do this. And the email I got and the conversation I had with the investigator today, he strongly insisted.
And I got the same email, Councilman Karyosha, that said, don't release documents. It didn't say anything in there about discussion in a council meeting.
Well, again, I recall that it did. So while it's under investigation, it's really not prudent to discuss any part or anyone and their actions or inactions in regards to the investigation. But I think what we should do is possibly wait on the clerk coming up with the first point that we made today and see whether or not it was voted on. I clearly recall that it was voted on.
Madam City Clerk?
Yes, Your Honor. At first glance, unapproved minutes. On January 2nd, at the special meeting, there was a motion on the floor made by Councilmember Nelson and seconded by Mayor Coviello that the city manager be placed on paid administrative leave pending the investigations. Further, in the minutes, that motion was withdrawn, and the council moved to start the search for the position of city manager.
And it was never voted on.
Now, then we moved on to the next meeting of the 6th, and there was discussion held. But the motion that was voted on was by Councilmember Kyriosha, seconded by Councilmember Stout, to bring in the FDLE and to authorize the city attorney to bring in her investigation attorney.
That's what was voted on.
Let her
not the
finish.
leave.
Now, I would just like to emphasize that these are draft minutes,
Mhm.
and they're still pending a final review and approval from council.
Mr. City Manager, your light's on again?
Yes. My recollection, that I'd like Kimberly to go back and review the tapes, is that Mr. Kyriosha made a motion to hire the investigator for an administrative investigation, and I believe he had a compromise solution, and that was that if the investigator found anything that would warrant placing me on leave, she would immediately come to mayor and council, and you would discuss doing that.
That's right.
And the reason that Mr. Kyriosha, if I may mention that, is because you talk about continuity, and again, I'm here about my reputation. I'm not here about the money or my job. I'll do a great job as long as I'm here, but my reputation has been tarnished, and it's been tarnished every meeting for almost 2 months. But I believe why I believe Mr. Kyriosha made that resolution was because it was to, again, I've never put someone on leave based on an unsubstantiated accusation in a letter. If I did that every time I had a letter about an employee, there'd be a lot of employees on leave. And the issue that I was concerned with is that if this council, to have continuity, if you want to place me on leave because of an unsubstantiated accusation or more accusations, then if there's a letter against Dolores or the auditor or any one of your employees, you'd have to be, from my perspective, taking a logical, linear approach to this, you have to put them on leave too. That's why I believe Mr. Kyriosha made that motion to have the investigator do her investigation, and if she found something that would warrant placing me on leave, she would immediately contact the attorney, and then you would be advised.
That's correct. That's how I do recall it at this time. You are correct, Mayor. We didn't vote on the specifics of placing them on leave, but we did vote on waiting until there was corroborating evidence to the allegation if we were going to place them on leave.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams?
Councilmember Kyriosha is correct, because I do remember that. This is like a reality show. This is really getting interesting. We're not being paid for it. Every time, first of all, we can't have a conversation up here talking about something like this that could be considered confidential, which is something he deserves until the investigation is done or corroborated. We have TV cameras in here all the time. In fact, we're being broadcast live right now. So every time that we get into this, it does more to damage his reputation. It does more to make us look like crazy people. We need to wait until something happens. Nothing has happened. A letter has been written. Has not been corroborated. That's all we have. And I don't understand why it's necessary to keep bringing this up, bringing this up, bringing this up. Let's wait until we get something that we can work with. We don't have anything right now that we can work with. So I don't agree with putting him out on leave. Absolutely not, because we have no proof that he's done anything. So,
And I'm going to reiterate that when our finance director was put out on leave, there was no proof for that either, except that we had some IRS issues. There was no signed documentation that was given, and she was out on leave immediately. And and I just think in order to do an impartial, fair investigation, that you need to put people out on leave with pay. They're only going to take a week or two. It's not going to take that long, so they can go about it. Because when I hear things like I heard regarding an RFP that was under an investigative letter, okay, being pulled for whatever reason, I want to question that. And I have every right to question that, because that's part of this investigation. So it's okay to do something like that I know about, and then I'm going to sit here and be quiet? I think that's impeding what's being done. And there's some information there that we should be made aware of. Councilmember Welsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question regarding the suspension of the RFP. That's been done because we have ongoing investigation. So once the investigation is complete, will the RFP process continue?
Wonder Root Procurement Manager, yes, ma'am.
Yes, it'll continue after the investigation is complete. All right, thank you. That answers one question. And then the next question I have is for Madam City Clerk. We have a motion on the floor. Could you please remind me of the business at hand, which is the motion that we have on the floor?
At this time, there is no motion on the floor. Several members of council have given an agreement that they believe the interview should be transcribed, but there is no motion on the floor.
There is a motion, okay. So then I'd like to make a motion that we pay for the transcripts of the investigation
I second it.
and return to the order of business.
Is there any other discussion on that? We'll go to the roll on that. Anybody have discussion on that? Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
no.
Carriosha?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 nay, motion carried.
Councilmember Stout?
Yes. I was the speaker last week, Tuesday night, at the Boat Club, and one of the members is a retired banker. And he felt that what happened when he was actually involved prior to his retirement, that nothing in an investigation would ever become public knowledge. He even told me about one incident with one of his higher-placed employees that the gentleman had a drinking problem. And so he talked with him, and he told him that either that he needed to take a couple of weeks vacation to tell all the other employees that he was going on vacation, and then admit himself into a institution where he could dry out and come back, or he would be fired. The employee did as he was told, stopped drinking, came back to the bank, and no one in that bank knew anything that had transpired because the investigation was kept quiet. It never hurt his reputation, and that's how I believe investigations should be handled. This should not have come forward. I'm just really sorry that it did because it hurts a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carriosha?
Mr. Mayor, in the event any of us come up with any knowledge or information relative to the investigation, we know who the investigators are. Let us contact them, give them the information, let them move forward. This constant bringing up about the investigation in public like this, as a former investigator for 10 years, I can tell you it does not help my case. It doesn't help gathering the evidence. Secondarily, I would like to bring the chief up and ask him his opinion on all of this, please.
Mayor, Council, Dave Newland, Police Chief. As indicated, I know that the email you had received from FDLE about, again, it was mentioned in conversation about not giving out documentation. It also is talked about not to talk about the investigation as well. I would, again, with all due respect, I would please ask that we don't talk about the investigation. It does impede the investigation by talking about it. We don't want to jeopardize the case. So again, I would ask, let the process work for itself. And there's one more thing I want to clarify that may help with some confusion, talking about admin leave. When we talk about the finance director being put on admin leave originally, that was not admin leave with cause. There's two different types of admin leave. I'm sure the city attorney can explain this. The reason why she was put on admin leave at the very beginning, and that's up to 60 days if I recall, was because of the audit that was being done by our city auditor as a fact finding for the finance department. The reason for that was it was recommended by all of us in one room, by about at least 6 of us, including the city attorney, outside legal department, and others, that it was best that the finance director not be present when the auditor does their fact finding of the finance department. So that was admin leave, but not with cause. When we talk about admin leave with cause, as of now, that wasn't until after they found cause based on the fact finding done by the auditor. At that point, the finance director, along with the other 2 employees, were put on admin leave with cause, with pay. So there is a difference. So I just want to explain that. And going back to originally, we did have paperwork and documentation as well that led us to the area of going towards the fact finding with the auditor. So I want to explain that because that does make a big difference. I'll stand by for any questions.
Councilmember Kariosha, did you know about the RFP being pulled?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, but it's, again, Mr. Mayor.
It's part of the letter that was being looked at, and I see that it gets pulled. It's just another instance where, you know, we need to clear the way so investigators can do their job quickly and accurately, and I firmly believe that. When I hear about somebody talking about what's done in the private sector, that doesn't work in this public sector arena. The only person that can put the city manager on leave is this body, is this council, nobody else, okay? And when he's the one that has the final say on anybody going out on leave. So, Chief Doolin, when you said there's a room of 6 people sitting there making that decision, the real decision is only one person that can make that call, and that's the city manager. And I don't believe we had the signed 941s when this took place. I was verified last week that we didn't have them when we put our finance director out on leave. All I'm looking for is consistency in what we do as a group. Okay, and when we choose and pick and decide this is okay, but that's not okay, we need to be consistent in what we do. And to me, to be consistent means when you put somebody out at a high level and you do that to them, there's not a lot of, I didn't see a lot of reasoning to that because we were looking at lower level people that caused the problem, and there was an immediate supervisor and then another supervisor. There was cooperation from day one when the auditor went over there, but we put the person out on leave anyway to be consistent. Well, we're not being consistent in my mind, and that's how I feel, and I'm going to bring that forward.
Mayor, I would agree, we need to be consistent. I think that's the part that's confusing right now is because, as I mentioned, the finance director was put on admin leave. Originally, it was not with cause. That's the difference. It was based on the fact that we were asked, the city auditor, to do a fact finding and to look into the numbers with the finance department. It was in the best interest of the city and the director not to be there during that time frame. However, after that was completed and the memo that you received from the auditor that talked about the 941s, that's when it went to admin leave with cause. So again, there's 2 different types.
Right.
That's being consistent.
But when we bring an investigator that we're going to pay some $20,000 to, okay, I want them to be able to go in without anybody looking at what they're doing, okay, and do their job. We're expending taxpayer dollars, okay, to do an investigation. I want it to be done quickly and accurately for the betterment of everybody, okay, and that's what I'm looking for. And I just don't know that we're being consistent and the fact that we're allowing the employee, most of the investigation is towards that area, okay, as well as what's being done and written in that letter, and it should be clear that person should not be there, okay? We shouldn't be pulling RFPs and doing things of that nature, and I just think that's the right way to go. And I'm going to make maybe one other comment. You know, these investigations, all these things are costing the taxpayer dollars. It's costing us money.
And Mayor, if I may, the only thing I would say as well is you have, again, as
It's
a
not
reminder,
unreasonable to put a person under investigation out with pay while they do the investigation.
but not when you have a document that's unsupported. That's what you have right now. You have an allegation that's not been supported or verified.
But we've done that with the other people. Yeah, absolutely we have.
We have not.
Yeah, we have. I had the auditor come up last week and say she never, ever saw any 941s when Vicki Bateman was put out on leave.
And that's why I just explained the difference. There's the admin leave originally was without cause. That was before they did the fact finding. That was up to 60 days. Then there was, once they did their fact finding, and then the 941s came out, as the memo I mentioned, that changed it to with cause. That's the difference.
Mr. Mayor, I still have the floor. The other point I'd like to bring up once again is that I did have a motion that we not put him out on leave until we come up with corroborating evidence. And this council voted on that motion, and it's where it sits right now. If we have corroborating evidence, yes. If we have something here that points to the fact that there was wrongdoing, yes, we'll put him out on leave.
You don't.
But that was the vote. That was the motion I made.
Okay.
And we all voted on it, and it's the way it stood, sir.
Right, and I'm saying pulling the RFP, in my mind, was not something that we should have done, and that's your corroborating evidence. Okay, that RFP is specifically the one that dealt with part of this investigation.
And you've seen that.
Should have left it alone, okay, and not pulled it.
Have you seen the RFP? Have you read the RFP?
I have not.
Okay.
But I have firsthand knowledge from
And the
somebody
person-
who works for the council.
Right.
Who explained to me what took place.
Okay. I would just turn it over to the investigator. And if he says that it warrants what we voted on, then we should move forward. But I really don't see us, it's really getting a little bit out of hand, you know. I'm done. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Zerlag?
I'm going to restate what I said earlier, maybe with being a little more articulate. The reason the RFP was pulled, Mayor, is because you read a portion of a letter that was accusatory toward one of my employees about having an in with, and this letter is now a public document with, I think, NBC. Part of the letter that you read publicly had to do with one of my employees, and I believe it had to do with having him have an in with one or more vendors. And so that was brought to my attention. Stan, where's Wanda? And it was brought to my attention that this indeed was mentioned at the dais, and that anyone that was a vendor would watch this, or if we went through the RFP process, as a result of what was said at the dais by you, Mayor, not by me or anyone of my staff, that it would put a dark mark on the process if someone were to file a protest. And so when it was brought to my attention, it was recommended to me, and I agreed that we suspend the RFP until after the investigation was made. Not because of anything that we did or my employees did, but because you read a letter that's not substantiated that pertained to the golf course. And I'll ask Mrs. Roop if what I said is correct or incorrect.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stout?
When I mentioned the bank earlier, and you did point out that that was a business, it wasn't government, but it was people's reputations. In the 7 years, more than 7 years that we have had the same city manager, Mr. Zerlag, he's done or had 5 investigations during this time.
7.
The investigations never became public and should not have, because these are people's reputations. And therefore, this should not have happened either. It should have been just as was done in the past if you're talking consistency. Consistency was that the investigations were completed, council was told about them, but they never came to the public. Therefore, people's reputations were saved. Thank you.
Thank you. But when somebody's costing the residents and taxpayers money for investigations and things of that nature, then I find it's only that individual that can ruin their reputation because they're the ones responsible for what I see as violations. I'll leave it at that.
Mayor, could I request a 5-minute recess?
Okay. Recess 5 minutes?
Yeah, I've got to go to the restroom.
Yeah.
Bring the meeting back into order. Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, I don't want to prolong this anymore. I don't agree with it to begin with, but there are a couple things I do want to say. First, if you look around and see the three people up here that are pushing really hard back at you about this situation, the three of us have worked with the city manager for years. We know him, we trust him, we know what's going on. So it's very frustrating to us what's going on. The other thing is, if you're so determined to think that he's going to contaminate an investigation, which I absolutely do not, then why don't we do it this way? When investigators come in and go into his office or whatever, I'll have Phyllis call me, and I'll go pick him up, and we're going to go out and have some lunch. Get him out of the building. I don't know why you're so worried about that. You know, we've trusted him for what, 8 years now? And he's never given us a reason not to. And I'm not going to start now. So anyway, now I'm done. No more. If my light goes on again, don't call me.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on item B, update the acceleration of the construction of the fire stations 12 and 13. Or did I skip something? I'm sorry. Speed limit. Mr. Corbett?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bill Corbett, City Traffic Engineer. So as a result of the recently completed streetscape project on Southeast 47th Terrace, Public Works staff decided to take a look at the posted speed limit in comparison to the prevailing speeds seen on 47th Terrace. As you know, the construction of the streetscape project included many different features to enhance the pedestrian experience along the corridor. It included some traffic calming elements. We have recently installed four-way stops at multiple locations. This street is truly unique in our downtown area, and as a result, we wanted to make sure that it was as safe as possible and that we were able to enhance the pedestrian experience as much as possible. Also, the reduction of the speed limit would increase the potential size of the furniture zones to increase the size of the outdoor seating area for restaurants, to increase the amenities available for patrons to use. Our study, we collected the data, and it did show that the prevailing speed indicated a posted speed limit to be appropriate at 25 miles per hour, and that is a reduction from 30 miles per hour, which was previously posted. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Board discussion, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Council discussion, Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously, I lied about the light. Bill, I spent the weekend down there, and the one thing I noticed when I drove down 47th Terrace was the lack of stop signs. There used to be stop signs at every crossroad.
There's actually a stop sign at every crossroad, except for 11th. That one is a T intersection, so that is just east of Dixie Roadhouse. But other than that, there are stop signs at every intersection from Coronado to Del Prado, with the exception of the roundabout.
The only one I saw was the, 8th goes into Park Square?
10th goes into Club Square.
Club Square, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yes, sir. So that was a four-way stop. We've recently implemented all-way stops at 8th and 9th. Those were the only two that were missing. There was an existing four-way stop at 10th. 11th is a T, therefore it's not an all-way. Vincennes is the roundabout, and then it goes down to 15th, which is an existing four-way stop.
All right, the reason I'm asking, with the stop signs, it serves two purposes. Obviously, it's going to slow the traffic down, but the second thing is it gives people a place to cross the street. You've got stop cars. I went across 47th twice, and both times I had to just kind of jet between slow-moving cars to get across the street. Sometimes they stop, other times they keep rolling. You don't know what they're going to do. But the slower the traffic goes, the more opportunities people have to really not pay any attention to any laws, just shoot between the cars. Shoot between, I can get between two cars doing 20 miles an hour, okay, as long as they're not, that close together. I think that creates a more dangerous situation, especially for pedestrians, because we've got to go one side to the other, constantly, up and down the street. There's businesses on both sides. So I don't really agree with dropping the speed limit. I don't think that that's going to do what we want it to do. I think it's actually going to exacerbate the situation. I think stop signs, putting all the stop signs back in at all the intersections, will probably do a much more reliable job of slowing the traffic and giving the pedestrians the access to cross the street at those intersections. And then the rest of the traffic will be moving. It's 30 now, I believe?
It is 30, that is correct. However, the data shows that the prevailing speeds indicate a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour. So although the sign says 30, traffic is traveling at a speed which would indicate a 25 mile per hour posted speed limit.
Okay.
And there are stop signs, as I mentioned previously, at every single intersection along the corridor.
Well, I didn't see them. I was there.
Have somebody beer?
All right. No, I just wanted to throw that in because it was, I did a lot of walking downtown this past weekend and I was very observant of where I could get across, where I couldn't, so that type of thing. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gunter?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. First off, I know we've added some stop signs at a couple of the intersections here within the last few weeks to make it four-way stop intersections, and I agree. I think that that was the right thing to do. I think sometimes the residents or the visitors got confused because some were four-way stops so they really didn't know. I saw people before the signs were actually installed, they were stopping thinking it was a four-way stop. So I do think that was the right direction to go. If my memory serves me correctly, all the intersections except for the roundabout, there are four-way stop signs except the one that you mentioned, and that's a T intersection. One thing that concerns me, and there's only a few businesses now that are utilizing the outdoor area out on the sidewalk for their patrons to dine at. But I think that's what we hoped in designing this area, and that's why we put this in. So I think just for that reason alone, having people dining 5 foot off the curb warrants a 25 mile an hour zone. And that's why I will support this, for that reason alone. And any time that you can reduce the speed, I think is going to increase the safety in the area. I don't think I've ever heard where a higher speed, you have better safety as far as the pedestrians and the individuals that'll be sitting in this dining area. So I'll support this, and we'll see where the vote goes. Thank you.
Councilmember Kariosha.
I support the 25. I support the 25 mile an hour, but I thought possibly by Big Blue, parking lot, Dixie, Nevermind, I thought that crossing, maybe we can do something with a lighted area where a pedestrian pulls up, hits the button, and it lights up yellow like they have. Do we have one by the school yet? And we have one up in, they have one up in Pine Island, Matt Lachey.
Correct.
Because it's a huge parking lot on both sides, we've got 3 eateries and again, Dixie. Why don't we think about putting a lighted crosswalk there? Would that be something we might be interested in?
So previously, we had discussed the implementation of flashers, our rapid rectangular flashing beacons at our mid-block crossings. We decided to sign everything in accordance with the MUTCD, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Those flashers are not required, and what we're doing is monitoring the safety of the situation, and if we see there's a need for those devices, we will definitely implement those at that time. At this point, we have not identified a need for the additional infrastructure. We have been keeping track of the traffic crashes that are occurring along the entire corridor to make sure that we're in tune with the safety aspects of 47th Terrace. The mid-block crossings in Matlacha, of course, are a little different. You don't have stop signs on either side, and you have a very high volume roadway. We're looking about 4,000 to 5,000 vehicles per day on this roadway. High number of pedestrians, absolutely. But the mid-block crossing is installed based on the national criteria, and at this time, we recognize that it is operating and functioning as it is designed.
Thank you. Councilmember Gunter.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, and I know I had sent you an email a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, where one of the stop signs was kind of off to one side, and there were some parking areas there. Have you had the time to take a look at that?
Yes, sir. So actually, we're working on preparing a work order now to add some supplemental pavement markings, a stop ahead sign, and we're going to look at possibly increasing the size of that stop sign. I'm reluctant to move it out into the striped area because what you're doing at that point is pulling it out from behind the curb, and you're introducing a new hazard into the roadway, and I see that as a potential for conflict. Right. So what we're going to do is implement the supplemental pavement markings, enhance it so it's more visible as you approach it, as opposed to being right up on it, and we'll continue to monitor it, and if it does need to be moved, we can evaluate it at that time.
So one of the things you may be considering is actually sometimes you can see stop on the roadway in white letters. Is that what you're talking about?
That's exactly correct. So we'll have a stop bar, it'll say stop, and then a few hundred feet ahead, we will have a stop ahead sign as well as stop ahead on the asphalt. So.
Okay. And the other thing I just want to mention too, and I know we just spent a lot of money on cameras down there, and I think we've all seen the cameras are pretty incredible high definition cameras. Maybe it's something that we can have staff at some point just kind of keep an eye on the cameras. We have them at every intersection just to be able to evaluate if there is a pedestrian issue like Councilman Carriosha had mentioned. That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Madam City Clerk, call the roll.
Costin?
Aye.
Coviello?
Aye.
Gunter?
Aye.
Stout?
Aye.
Welsh?
Aye.
Williams?
Aye.
Carriosha?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Update on the accelerated construction of fire stations 12 and 13. Chief Lamb.
Ryan Lamb, Fire Chief. I have a small presentation if you'd like to see it. If not, we could just discuss the topic, whatever you'd like.
You can go through your presentation. I think it's important.
Okay, as discussed previously at a COW meeting, Councilmember Gunter discussed the options of advancing the construction of Fire Station 12 and 13 forward 1 year respectively. The current budget plan has Fire Station 12 for design in 2021 and construction in fiscal year 22. Station 13 is slated for design in fiscal year 22 and construction in 23. I'll go through some of these here and we can talk about it a little bit more. This is currently our average response times. And so average, and we look here, you can see dispatch, turnout, and travel time. I'll be quick through this area. I know you guys have seen this information before. You can see in the green box here, this is our average. So if you imagine a bell curve, this is right in the middle. 50% of the time we're going to do better than that. 50% of the time we're going to do worse than that. So for service reliability, we look at the 90% fractile. So if you think of that bell curve all the way on the right-hand side, we're going to do better 9 out of 10 times. And then that 10% are outliers. And we believe that's high service reliability to make sure we can accurately depict what the citizen or resident experience is going to be. And so you can see here our 90% number is 11.7 for all of our service modalities. Our goal that we've established as a city is 10 minutes for call processing, turnout time, and travel to we call the hello to hello experience. 911, hello, what's your emergency? Firefighter knocking at the front door. Hello, how can I help you? The NFPA 1710 recommendation is a 4-minute travel time. We utilize a consulting firm to look at what it would take to achieve that 90% of the time within the city. You can see here every red dot on this map would be a fire station, and that would be 63 fire stations, and so that is unobtainable. We have a unique topography and geography with our canals. So we've adopted a 6-minute travel time, which is the accreditation standard, as we're continuing to pursue organizational accreditation. You can see here, these are what we call bleed maps. That's just 90% of the time how far we can travel within 6 minutes from those locations. And so I'd like to kind of point you out here. I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen here. This area here is where Station 12 is proposed to go, and I'll go to that next slide. Oh. So there's the advancement of Fire Station 12. Currently, Station 6 on Chiquita and Cape Coral Parkway covers Sandoval. We pulled some recent data looking at Sandoval, Heatherwood Lakes, and the Cape Coral Sports Complex. Their 90% fractile numbers were 13 minutes. So it's an area that we continue to have a slower response to, and that was with all the trucks in their stations. There's not multiple calls. One of them was a structure fire. So we tried to look at that and make sure that we didn't have any bad apples in that data. We're continuing to see development in that area, and there's a need for a fire station there. There's a large assisted living facility. I've got some close-ups of where the station's going to go. I'll direct your attention up here to this other area, if you can see the cursor, in this Pondella, Pine Island Road, Del Prado area. That's where Station 13 is proposed to go. Again, we cover all the way up to 41. We cover the racetrack there, Judd Creek. You've seen the car dealerships, the multi-level apartment complexes that are continuing to go in that area. So that is also a need in that area as well. Moving on further, this is what our master plan tentatively looks like. It's 16 stations that build out. We've worked with Don and the real estate division to get majority of these properties set aside before the surplus property was sold off. So that's what we're looking at. Depending on development, there might need to be 1 or 2 more, but they'll address that at that time, beyond my time here. This is currently what our each individual station zone looks like. Again, because of some of the canals, it's a unique zoning. Why it's important to show up fast. We know fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. You can see from the time that where the fire is detected and we're notified, we're trying to get there before a flashover occurs, or get there shortly after it does, so we can begin to protect lives. Also, for cardiac arrests, we know that time counts. We track survivability, but we're also looking at neurologically intact outcomes. Again, we want somebody to come back to the community. And so you can see here on the graph, the longer it takes for us to get there, get CPR started, and get somebody defibrillated, the time continues to reduce what their likelihood of survivability looks like. This is Fire Station 12. You can see the red dot here on the map on the left. That is the new assisted living facility just to the south of it. It's Cape Christian Church just to the west. And the major intersection to the south is Chiquita and Veterans. To the right here, this is, I believe, Oliver Clark used to call these chiclet drawings, just basically can the space needed fit on there with the parking and the retention and all those things. So this is not set in stone. We might move the station a little closer to the road. We might put the parking lot in a different spot. These are just making sure that we fit to the size. There is still design costs, even though we're using the same template for a fire station. We do receive a reduced cost because we are utilizing those same plans, but there is a cost for civil site design to make sure our road accesses, swales, how do you engineer a fire station to that site. And also Fire Station 13, you can see here where that is potentially going to be located with that drawing there as well. And that's what I have.
Thank you.
Talking about the finances of it, Finance Department did give us 2 different options to look at moving it forward. Again, all of these costs are anticipated within the budget. Would just be advancing them 1 year. The capital pieces, because they're a one-time purchase, are things that don't have a large impact because they're anticipated. The major impact is going to be for Fire Station 12, the $1.6 million and to hire an additional 18 personnel. That's just, again, it's already planned. It's just going to be advancing it 1 year. I'd also tell you that by advancing the construction of these stations, we're currently getting ready to break ground on Fire Station 2 here in hopefully about a month. The guaranteed maximum price we're going to be bringing back before this body for approval, but it's come in about $200,000 under the anticipated costs for that. Again, there'll be more to come on that. However, advancing these forwards, you could also realize cost savings because every year we anticipate an escalation in construction costs.
Thank you. There was two areas for financing. There was an A and a B. One was just general funds. The other was using some impact fees. Do you want to explain that a little bit? And then Chief Lamb, are you looking for this to move forward tonight, or are we just discussing it?
I'm not sure that gets us a question. I know Councilmember Gunter brought it up. There was a discussion if there was a second if this could be a votable item. I'm not sure. This might be a question for Madam City Attorney.
Okay. Is this something we can vote on if we want to move this forward or move it up a year?
Just a spreadsheet.
Unless it's something that you have previously done by resolution. I mean, most of your votes recently have been done pursuant to a resolution.
Got other lights on. Councilmember Williams.
Just a quick question, Chief. Moving these up a year, is it going to increase our overall cost for these stations for any reason, or are we just moving the money with the construction and it's all the same?
We're moving it forward. However, it should decrease the costs of the stations.
Decrease it?
Should decrease the cost because we're building them sooner, and we build on an escalation factor year after year. There's also Station 12 and 13 are new stations, unlike Station 2, where we already have the staff, we already have the truck. Station 12 and 13, we have to add in an engine, a ladder truck, and a battalion chief vehicle as well. So those are all things that, again, steal costs. We'll also receive a discount in purchasing those vehicles early as well. It's somewhere to the tune of, I was looking at our CIPWs, our capital improvement plans, worksheets that we have the details of these things laid out in there. It could be to the tune of $300,000 a piece.
I know the fire truck is a huge expense, so, thank you.
Mr. City Manager?
We can look at this as a budgetary item. We have a 3-year budget. We can bring back how the document would look by advancing everything 1 year contained in Chief Ryan's recommendation. You can then vote on that, and that would then be the new amended budget for this issue.
Thank you.
I guess the one issue with that is the advancement of Fire Station 12 would put it as designed in this current year, and that would be an item for possibly a budget amendment.
Right, that would be we come back for a budget amendment.
Right. So the cost of building the station would actually be probably a little less, but then we incur the actual operating costs sooner, a year sooner, which is what, 1.6 was what I saw?
Yes, sir. It's about the year of the construction, we take about a half a year. We take about a half a payroll for that just because we don't hire them that whole year. We wait until the station's getting close to putting in operation, and then we time that out.
Well, based on the population growth that we're experiencing, it's needed now. So to push it up a year, I'd be all for that. Councilmember Gunter.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I also, and that's why I brought this forward, I would recommend that we bring this forward as soon as possible so we can kind of get the ball rolling on this. Looking at the data, and if you look at the growth in these areas, it's only getting worse. Like the chief said, you know, their average response time right now is 11.7, and that's really not where we want to be. These areas are at least 13 minutes. And when you're talking about a fire or a heart attack victim, the difference between 10 minutes and 13 minutes is huge. So because of those reasons, I would be in favor moving both of these stations ahead 1 year. One area that wasn't really discussed on the option A and option B, we do have some FEMA money. So if we wanted to utilize any of that FEMA money for this, we could do that as well, or at least have that topic of discussion, or we can pick Plan A or Plan B. But I do think that it needs to be brought forward so we can vote on this and get the thing rolling so the doors are open. That's what's important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Just to add to Councilmember Gunter's comment, from the time we get official approval, we're anywhere 18 to 24 months from approval to operation.
So we'll get this brought back. This is our recommendation.
I'd like to get it back maybe by the second meeting in February.
Yep. They're going to bring it back with a budget amendment.
What we're trying to make sure is we have clarity on what your direction is. Are we holding off on taking any action until we meet in February again? Okay. Thank you.
I think it's good we bring it back and get some public input on it. Okay, let's move on. Reports of council. Councilmember Cosner, report.
No report.
Councilmember Gunter.
Quickly, myself, along with the other council members that was identified earlier, we all attended the committee meeting for the 2020 Conservation Fund as far as 4 Mile Cove. Glad to report that that was passed unanimously. Also, I attended the art festival this weekend. I saw the mayor there, so I know he was there. Another great event for the community. And I attended the budget review committee this morning. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Stout. Councilmember Stout.
Yes, last week, I was a speaker at the Voters Club on Tuesday night, and on Thursday, I was at the Conservation 2020 Land Acquisition meeting in Fort Myers.
Thanks, George.
Those are the two main things that I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Welsh.
Last Thursday, I also attended the Conservation 2020 committee meeting where I spoke. Also attended the Cape Coral Art Festival. I have signed up for the Cape Coral Citizens Academy, which is scheduled to begin in February. And I would like to attend the National League of Cities in March. That's being held in Washington, D.C. So I'm presenting that to my fellow council members. I believe that Councilmember Cosden and Nelson are also attending. That's it.
Okay. I don't see any reason why you can't attend. Everybody in agreement with that? Okay. Okay. Thumbs up. Okay. Councilmember Williams, report.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week, actually last Tuesday, Fire Station 11 had a kind of a dedication, I guess, or celebration. But anyway, they had negotiated a contract with the county to have an ambulance housed at Fire Station 11, which I'm very appreciative of since I live in that area. So it was good. It was a very nice day. They were very welcoming and tours, and I brought the grandkids, and they had a blast. You know, there's a fire engine, and 10-year-old was just blown away by the whole thing. So anyway, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. Appreciated what you guys did. I attended the art festival this weekend, both days. I am a Rotarian, and we were the people putting it on. So I was in a booth watching people go by. Saturday was huge, absolutely huge. I think we broke records. Everybody was happy. The businesses around us were happy. I couldn't even guess at the number. Somebody had told me that last year, over the 2 days, we had 100,000 people. It's going to break it this year, and I think probably Saturday we had, 70 or 80,000 people. It was just packed all day, and everybody was having a lot of fun. Everybody was happy, and it's just a great event for Cape Coral, for people to come in from all over the country, actually, to see Cape Coral. I know that the realty booths were pretty busy with people asking questions and trying to get pricing, so we might have gotten a few new residents to come down here, I don't know. We're not short on residents, but you know, it's always nice to have new people. Anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Carriosha.
No report.
I also had the opportunity with Councilmember Williams to attend the Fire Station 11, where we had that county partnership to put the ambulance inside the fire station, and it's great for that northwest area. It'll improve the ambulatory response time. I was happy to be out there and see that we were able to get that negotiated. And again, it's just another good partnership with the county. I also went to the Chamber of Commerce Awards Gala and board installation. Met my friend there, Commissioner Sandelli, who did the actual swearing in for the board member, and we had some good discussions. I did attend the art festival, and I also had an opportunity to go to an executive MPO meeting during the week. Okay, let's go on to reports. Mr. Zerlag, report.
No report.
Madam City Attorney, report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have only one item this evening. As the council is aware, the city is a party to a lawsuit entitled Garcia versus City of Cape Coral, case number 218 CV 790 FTM 38 NPM. Accordingly, pursuant to Section 286.011, subsection 8 of the Florida statutes, I am requesting that the City Council convene in a closed attorney-client session to discuss settlement strategies. If it is the council's pleasure to do so, the session could be scheduled for Monday, January 27th, 2020 at 3 p.m.
That's right before the CAL meeting.
Yes, that is right before your CAL meeting, which I think is at 4:30.
Okay.
Is council's pleasure to schedule that?
Got it good? Okay. Everybody good with that? Good. Okay, we'll schedule that for the 27th at 3 p.m.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no other issues.
The time and place of future meetings is the one we just mentioned at 3 p.m. on the 27th. And then a committee of the whole meeting is scheduled for Monday, January 27th, 2020 at 4:30 in council chambers. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.